The story known as the Chronicles of the World of Seven Hues began. It followed the typical iSky formula, centering on a high school student from Earth, Lee Gun-woong. However, the power scaling within this series was infamously absurd. Survival for the main character often felt less like skill and more like sheer, dumb luck. The world was populated by dangerously obsessive love interests, charming one moment and potentially lethal the next. Shadowy organizations seemingly popped into existence with the sole aim of world destruction. Even supposed allies couldn't always be trusted, often looking for the perfect moment to betray the protagonist. Consequently, the series garnered a fan base that was less than enthusiastic. Despite the questionable plot, some readers, including the narrator, found a strange enjoyment in its chaotic nature. He often wondered, hypothetically, if he'd still find it amusing if he suddenly woke up inside that very world. Reality crashed in with someone shouting for Ludian. He found himself scrambling through a rocky landscape, responding that he was on his way to Cerritos. The situation immediately presented itself as a catastrophe. He was facing a massive, animated stone golem. The sheer size of the creature made him gulp. Getting hit by that fist would surely turn him into something resembling tomato paste. As the golem swung its heavy stone arm, Ludian was thrown backward, letting out a cry. Sir Edos immediately chastised him for his tardiness, calling him a dolt. Ludian quickly tossed spare swords to Sir Edos and Sir Colin, urging them to move. Internally, Ludian cursed the knight's ingratitude, even though he had fulfilled his duty. The golem loomed, preparing another strike. Just as its hand descended, one of the knights bravely intercepted the blow, straining against the immense force. Seeing his superior engaged, Ludian quickly masked his frustration, plastering on a look of appreciation for their hard work, complete with a shaky thumbs up. The knight roared, pushing back against the monster. The resulting shockwave sent debris flying, catching Ludian off guard and knocking him down, eventually skidding to a halt. Gritting his teeth against the pain, a trickle of blood on his lip, he pushed himself up, determined. It had already been 3 years since he'd woken up in this body. He remembered opening his eyes to find himself a 14-year-old orphan, surrounded by unfamiliar faces speaking a foreign tongue. The single saving grace in that terrifying situation was inheriting the original Ludian's memories. This allowed him to understand the language, a fortunate convenience. His initial month was spent desperately and foolishly trying to find a way back to Korea. These attempts, including a grim effort involving a rope and a tree, proved utterly futile. He recalled later joining a group, feeling out of place. The Knights of Iskar were preparing to enter some ruins, their leader proclaiming loudly that a holy sword and treasures awaited them inside. This enthusiastic leader was Colin von Iskar, heir to the Margrave. Colin confidently assured his knights that mere weaklings wouldn't impede their progress. Ludian internally sighed. This guy, technically Ludian's master, was more like the head of a very loud, overconfident cheer squad, seemingly boosting the knight's blood pressure just by existing. Ludian silently wished the young master would tone it down, aware of the potential dangers of making so much noise. Colin, however, scoffed dismissively, questioning what mere monsters could possibly do to someone as great as him. Ludian could only weep internally at the sheer recklessness, wishing this maniac would show some caution. He sometimes lamented his fate. If only he'd reincarnated into one of those generic stories about becoming some overpowered noble scion, life would be much easier. Instead, he was stuck in the Seven Hue Chronicles, a world notorious for its brutal difficulty setting, practically designed to make protagonists suffer. The thought alone made him want to tear his hair out. The world of the Seven Hue Chronicles boasted an extraordinarily grim setting. Apocalyptic prophecies were apparently a dime a dozen, with the world having stared down its end at least 3 times already. Even random, unnamed antagonists possessed terrifying power, capable of obliterating cities or nations simply because they felt obstructed. Suddenly, shouts erupted about monsters. Ludian found himself once again facing danger, this time massive demonic figures. He groaned inwardly, ruing his terrible luck and wondering how he'd ended up in another dungeon. His despair was interrupted by a sharp slap. Countess Louisa Iskar stood before him, demanding to know what Ludian had done to draw the Count's attention. She reminded him harshly that his entire purpose as a hired commoner was to prevent these kinds of messes. If his incompetence interfered with Colin's future, she promised him a fate worse than being cancelled on Twitter. Nearby, Colin himself seemed to contemplate simply ending Ludian's employment permanently. Colin, the eldest son of Count Iskar and the region's future ruler, was unfortunately also its most prominent hooligan. Ludian sighed, reflecting that most of his recent troubles stemmed from this very fact. His life had become a cycle of cleaning up Colin's disasters, smoothing things over with Baron Amar about stolen horses, retrieving Sir Theor's heirloom sword, placating Sir Voltan, who was furious about Colin's advances towards his sister. Each time, Colin would simply brush it off, telling Ludian to handle it. Even informing Colin about the Count's fury regarding his dealings with black market figures earned only another dismissive, "just take care of it," right before Colin himself reacted with shock at being discovered. Ludian felt utterly cooked. He confronted Colin, reminding him this was the 5th major incident this month alone. He questioned the wisdom of associating with known criminals, pointing out how quickly Colin found trouble whenever left unsupervised. Why, Ludian lamented internally, did Colin insist on hanging out with the literal dregs of the Empire? Normally, Colin's associations might not be a fatal issue, given his status as the son of the ruler of Iskar. The real problem was where his latest debauchery took place. His scandalous behavior with women of ill repute was witnessed by visiting nobles staying at the castle, and news rapidly spread to the capital. Colin tried to downplay it, claiming he was merely spending time with them as the heir, even attempting the feeble excuse that he was gathering intelligence on their operations. Ludian wasn't buying it. Illegal activities like slavery, drugs, and loan sharking were already rampant near the border regions, prompting the central government to demand stricter oversight, which the Count had initially brushed off. Now, Ludian stressed, Colin's very public scandal provided the perfect pretext for the central government to interfere forcefully in everything. Colin visibly wilted under the pressure. Ludian felt a cold dread. If Colin, the heir, faced severe consequences, Ludian himself would undoubtedly be caught in the fallout. This crisis felt premature, something that shouldn't have occurred until much later in the narrative he remembered. He couldn't let this happen. He let out a long sigh, imagining his hair falling out from stress. He muttered darkly, suggesting Colin prepare for monastic life, as being stripped of his title seemed certain. Colin sputtered, telling him to wait. Ludian recalled the grim reality. In the capital, Nevin, noble scandals like this often ended with a trip to the guillotine. If Colin lost his head, Ludian knew his own would follow. Pondering the dire situation, he realized there was only one path forward. He knocked firmly on a heavy door. Upon receiving permission to enter, Ludian walked in, Colin trailing nervously behind him. They stood before a stern-looking man, presumably the Count or his representative. Internally, Ludian made his decision. He would expose every bit of Colin's delinquency himself. Ludian stood before Rickard von Iskar, the Margrave and Lord of Iskar, bracing himself. Standing beside the Margrave was Captain Derek Wanhausen of the Lionheart's Private Night Order, a man whose weary eyes seemed to understand the burdens Ludian carried. Ludian offered a faint smile, expressing gratitude for Sir Derek's unspoken sympathy. Despite Derek's understanding gaze, Ludian internally lamented the current mess, acknowledging that while Colin caused trouble outside his supervision, he should have managed the situation better. The Margrave, Rickard, addressed his son, Colin, his voice low, stating he'd heard from the head butler about the recent incident. He leaned forward, demanding to know the identity of the people Colin had contacted. As Colin hesitated, the Margrave revealed the gravity of the situation. Those individuals were part of an organization targeted for elimination by the 5 major Imperial Knight Orders under the direct command of the Imperial family. Lu Jian felt a chill. This was far more serious than he had initially perceived. The involvement of the Imperial Knights meant the scale of Colin's blunder was enormous. The consequence was swift. The Margrave declared that the Iskar family owed the Imperial family significantly for this. He then ordered Caline to prepare to enter a monastery, stunning his son. Rickard clarified it wasn't a life sentence, but a necessary period of reflection for at least 5 years. Lu Dian observed this, noting internally that the timeline aligned with his calculations. He knew the main story, according to his memories, was set to begin in about 5 years. By then, the continent would be engulfed in war, bloodshed would be rampant, and he risked being swept away into a miserable future. Colin desperately pleaded with his father, asking for a chance, slamming his hand down. He vowed vehemently to achieve great merit, enough to offset this failure and elevate the family name. The Margrave remained unimpressed, stating that ordinary merit wouldn't stop the Imperial family's intervention now. Only an extraordinary achievement could possibly change things. At this, the Margrave mentioned the Holy Sword, Daylight, causing Colin's eyes to light up with sudden hope. Lu Jian panicked internally, protesting silently. He knew the dungeon housing Daylight was impossibly difficult for someone at Colin's current level. He thought the young master wasn't just reckless. He seemed to have a death wish, maybe trying to speedrun his own demise. Colin, however, argued passionately, claiming the underworld group only appeared because information about the dungeon leaked. He proposed retrieving Daylight, the holy sword of the Duke Delphi I family, arguing this would surely secure the powerful Duke's support. Lu Dian saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt by Caline to twist the narrative for survival, knowing full well that underworld scum wouldn't trek out here just for dungeon exploration. Lu Dian recalled the lore surrounding this place from an episode titled Belly of Apophis. It was a dungeon where the evil god Apophis was sealed, attracting heretics plotting his resurrection. An army of 100,000 had once marched to subjugate them, only to be utterly consumed, becoming a grim lesson about the madness of dungeons. This incident led to the standard practice of sending reconnaissance teams first, a precaution Lu Dian felt certain the Count wouldn't bypass. Indeed, the Margrave initially refused, stating they couldn't commit significant forces to a dungeon of unconfirmed difficulty, regardless of its location in their territory. Colin clasped his hands, begging his father to believe in him, promising success. The Margrave hesitated, considering the plea. Lu Jian felt confident. Risking the air and an entire force was madness, unless the Count had gone mad. To Lu Jian's utter shock, the Margrave agreed, stating he would trust Colin just this once. He assigned 30 knights, including Derek, ordering them to retrieve Daylight since Colin had guaranteed it so strongly. Finally, the Margrave looked directly at Lu Dian, entrusting him with Calane's care. Lu Dian could only scream internally as the Margrave expressed renewed faith in his son, believing Colin wouldn't disappoint him this time. Colin beamed, assuring his father of his return with the Holy Sword, earning a proud, "That's my boy," from the Margrave. Lu Dian felt a wave of despair wash over him. He was well and truly screwed. Later, at the dungeon entrance, the harsh reality set in immediately. A hulking minotaur appeared, prompting Derek to order battle readiness. Derek noted grimly that encountering a minotaur right away signified a difficult path ahead, wondering about the horrors awaiting them deeper inside. They could only entrust their fate to the gods. Lu Dian, however, felt a small measure of relief. This monster, while dangerous, wasn't the kind of high-ranking demon or ancient weapon typical of the main story scenarios that would necessitate an immediate retreat. The appearance of a common monster like a minotaur suggested the dungeon, for now, operated within the realm of common sense. He watched the knights dispatch it quickly and signaled to move forward. Inside the dark, cavernous depths, Lu Dian contemplated his next move. He remembered the timeline. 3 years until the devastating war with the demons began, and 10 years until humanity faced extinction. There was still time before utter destruction. His personal plan was simple: survive this, accumulate wealth, and then disappear into some remote mountain corner to live out his days peacefully, roasting lizards over a campfire. He would forge his own happy ending. For the moment, things seemed to be proceeding smoothly enough. Colin, however, was already getting carried away, boasting loudly about acquiring not just daylight, but also the dungeon's riches. Derek cautioned him about the danger of speaking so loudly. Colin laughed it off, dismissing any worry, confident that nothing could scare him, until he looked up, puzzled. A small rock bounced off Ludian's head. Suddenly, more debris rained down. Ludian cried out in surprise. A heavy shape moved in the dust. Derek cursed, realizing their predicament. They had fallen into a trap. The floor beneath them gave way, sending the entire party plummeting into a lower cavern, landing amidst several imposing stone golems. Derek didn't hesitate, roaring for the knights to break through with force. He ordered Squad 1 to engage the golems while the rest protected the young lord. Amidst the chaos, Colin panicked, screaming for help. Ludian quickly grabbed the terrified heir, pointing towards a safer direction. But Ludian paused, confused. Why were the golems advancing specifically towards them, ignoring the other knights? Derek leaped, engaging one of the stone monstrosities, cleaving into its shoulder. But while Derek was occupied, another golem lumbered towards Colin, raising its massive stone hand. Colin shrieked Ludian's name, pleading for help. Cursing under his breath, Ludian shoved Colin aside, placing himself between the air and the descending blow. He knew, ultimately, he was just the attendant. If Colin died, he died too. The stone fist connected with crushing force. Ludian felt an explosion of pain, blood flying from his mouth as he was thrown to the cliff. Colin and Derek watched, horrified. As darkness encroached, Ludian desperately tried to call up his status window, his consciousness fading. A faint sound echoed as everything went black. Ludian's eyes snapped open with a start. He found himself lying on a shimmering, crystalline floor, momentarily disoriented and wondering if this was the afterlife, or perhaps just hell with better lighting. Pushing himself upright, he was surprised to find his body completely unharmed. He briefly entertained the dramatic notion that a desperate, last-second prayer had miraculously saved him, before dismissing the thought as absurd. Looking around, he took in the strange, brightly lit chamber constructed of luminous crystal, utterly bewildered about his location. His memories of the novel's lore surfaced. Dungeons were supposedly constructs of mana drawn from a negative dimension. Yet this place pulsed with an unnatural brightness inconsistent with such origins, unless powerful magic was involved. A disembodied voice suddenly echoed, announcing his awakening. Ludian flinched, startled by the unseen speaker. Before him materialized a bizarre entity, a large, floating mass of red, pulsating flesh dominated by a single, unblinking eye and trailing shadowy tendrils. The creature abruptly seized him, lifting him effortlessly. It offered a strange apology, suggesting his reaction was due to its own startling appearance, a backhanded compliment Ludian didn't appreciate. The entity, seemingly unfazed, continued, explaining Ludian was the first human it had encountered in a millennium, expressing surprise since it believed only beings of divine status could reach this hidden sanctuary. Ludian noted the creature lacked a mouth, yet its voice filled the space, a disconcerting paradox. He demanded to know where he was. The creature simply stated this was its place of sealing, elaborating that these were ancient ruins, remnants of the long-lost Adora civilization, created 3 millennia ago. The name meant nothing to Ludian. Adora was never mentioned in the original story he knew. Recognizing the need for more information, Ludian probed further, confirming the creature was indeed sealed within these ruins. The entity affirmed this, explaining it had remained dormant, lacking a designated master, until Ludian's arrival triggered its awakening. With that established, Ludian cautiously inquired about the creature's identity. It introduced itself grandly as Arcadia, the seventh-generation overseer-type artificial intelligence, a legacy of the Adora civilization. Artificial intelligence? Ludian balked internally. The creature looked more like a demon's discarded eyeball, yet it bore a name evoking paradise. Arcadia then made an unexpected proposal, asking Ludian to become its master. The request caught Ludian completely off guard. He warily questioned the potential consequences should he refuse the offer. Before he could ask about the benefits of accepting, Arcadia sharply poked his forehead. Ludian's vision momentarily flashed. A translucent blue screen materialized before him, a status window displaying his name, age, lineage, and basic attributes, though his overall combat power remained unquantified. Arcadia explained this interface was its primary means of assisting him in its current state. Ludian recognized it instantly. Arcadia clarified that while it wasn't a game system with quests, it could quantify stats, though a penalty obscured exact numbers if the power difference between observer and observed was too great. Ludian felt a surge of excitement. Even without precise numbers, this status window was an invaluable tool for survival. Arcadia further revealed that entry to this place was restricted by a specific qualification, unattainable even for gods, requiring means beyond conventional power. Curious, Ludian inquired about this unique requirement. Arcadia stated the sole qualification was simple, to be an outsider. When Ludian pressed for a definition, Arcadia admitted uncertainty, confessing Ludian's presence had confounded its prior assumptions, which leaned towards divinity. How, then, did it recognize him as an outsider? Arcadia explained its externally sealed main body reacted specifically to such beings. This status, Arcadia continued, granted Ludian the authority to retrieve terminals scattered by its creators. It listed these terminals, 6 auxiliary AIs named Eldorado, Elysian, Utopia, Dilmun, Shambhala, and Eden, each representing a different function like collection, exploration, healing, transport, combat, and restoration. A significant legacy indeed. Retrieving each terminal would grant Arcadia access to that unit's specialized abilities, and gathering all 6 would fully reactivate its main body. A realization dawned on Ludian. If Arcadia's words were true, this power offered possibilities far beyond his original plan of simply hiding. It presented a chance to actively shape a better future, a different ending. With newfound resolve, Ludian agreed, formally accepting the role of master. Arcadia commended his decision, calling it wise and warning that preparations were crucial as chaos would soon engulf the world. It expressed anticipation for their partnership. Ludian reciprocated, bestowing the nickname Adi upon the AI. Adi seemed to accept the name readily. It then conceded its current limitations due to its sealed state, suggesting they prioritize retrieving Shambhala, the combat AI, claiming its power could contend even with gods. Adi offered an enthusiastic cheer, which Ludian met with a growing suspicion he might have just agreed to a cosmic-level pyramid scheme. Adi inquired about his immediate plans. Ludian stated his priority was to regroup with his companions. Once the immediate danger passed, they could focus on locating the terminals. Adi approved of his master's proactive mindset. Fortunately, Adi possessed intimate knowledge of the dungeon's layout, including shortcuts and traps, guiding Ludian efficiently via teleportation. According to Adi, Ludian's original fate was death by golem-induced floor slam. However, Adi's timely awakening upon detecting his outsider presence allowed it to pull him into the sealed space at the last possible moment, cheating death. Ludian shuddered, reflecting on how close he'd come, wryly wondering if this near-death escape was yet another contrivance orchestrated by the story's notoriously cruel author. His thoughts were interrupted by an unexpected sight. He spotted the desiccated corpse of an adventurer slumped against a far wall. He expressed surprise that someone else had managed to penetrate this deep, speculating they must have been an exceptionally skilled individual to reach the dungeon's core. Audi clarified the body belonged to an adventurer who invaded the ruins roughly 10 years prior. This adventurer had skillfully bypassed the monsters above, but ultimately perished after a long struggle, lacking the outsider qualification needed to enter Audi's sanctuary. Lu Jian felt a pang of sympathy for the unfortunate soul who endured hardship only to be denied entry at the final hurdle, like finding a paywall before the final cutscene. Audi questioned Lu Jian's actions as he knelt beside the corpse. Lu Jian explained he was collecting the remains, claiming it was customary among adventurers to gather the belongings of the fallen, though internally acknowledging the similarity to looting. Audi seemed skeptical, pointing out the resemblance to grave robbing, but Lu Jian casually brushed off the accusation. He discovered a finely crafted gold pocket watch, estimating its value at perhaps 10 gold, suggesting the deceased was quite wealthy. Examining it closer, he found an inscription, Shell Retstein. Oddly, his mind first registered the name as Abel. As Lu Jian knelt beside the adventurer's corpse, the name, Abel Retstein, echoing strangely in his mind. He had definitely heard it somewhere before. Suddenly, the connection clicked, hitting him with the force of a speeding ice-sky truck. Abel, Audi, the floating eyeball AI, hovered nearby, questioning its master's sudden distress. Lu Jian stared at the name tag, clutched in the skeletal hand, the reality sinking in. He scrambled backward, dropping the watch, utterly shocked. Why this name of all names? Abel Retstein. That was the name of the overpowered protagonist from the Chronicles of the Seven-Colored World, the very novel he was trapped in. Lu Jian forced himself to take deep breaths, try to stay calm. Chronologically, this made no sense. It shouldn't be possible. He recalled Abel's, or rather Li Jianeng's, origins, a 19-year-old who, after failing his college entrance exam, actively sought out the infamous ice-sky truck and actually got his wish, transmigrating after the collision. Reborn as the son of a provincial baron, blessed by the creator god, Abel obtained the mythical artifact White World and the Order God's holy sword Grandia. His journey began immediately as a ridiculously strong character, effortlessly crushing demon spawn in the early stages of the story. So what was this? Lu Jian searched for inconsistencies. There was no definitive proof this skeleton was the protagonist. A reassuring detail was the tattered explorer's outfit. It belonged to the northern Urgan kingdom, not the Mauryan Empire where Abel was supposedly born. Furthermore, the skeleton was clearly that of a full-grown adult. Abel, notoriously, was on the shorter side and quite sensitive about it. This skeleton seemed too large to be him. Audi floated closer, inquiring if there was a problem. Lu Jian quickly shook his head, dismissing the concern. Internally, however, the worry lingered. Before the main story kicked off, Abel should still be a child, living a relatively normal life. The proximity of this dungeon to Abel's known territory was unsettling. He decided firmly that once clear of this dungeon, using the funds from the pocket watch, he would hire scouts to confirm Abel's current status and location. He carefully retrieved the watch and other small items from the corpse, hoping these potential plot items wouldn't inadvertently create a connection he didn't want. Audi indicated the way forward. It projected a holographic map, warning of monsters and traps on the direct path, and suggesting a detour. Lu Jian couldn't help but appreciate how remarkably convenient his new AI companion was. Following Adi's guidance, he soon spotted light ahead and the familiar figures of his companions. He jogged towards them, calling out enthusiastically to the young master. The response was not welcoming. Sir Derek barked at him to halt, sword raised threateningly, warning Lu Jian not to come closer or be cut down. Lu Jian froze, confused by the hostility. Was this some form of desertion, or perhaps Adi's presence was causing this reaction? Derek, eyes narrowed with suspicion, declared there was no way Lu Jian could have survived the fall unharmed. He concluded Lu Jian must be a doppelganger attempting deception. Lu Jian had to admit Derek wasn't entirely wrong. Returning unscathed was highly suspicious. He quickly formulated a plausible lie, explaining how he miraculously grabbed a branch, found a small cave seemingly prepared by a previous explorer, and managed to sneak back without encountering monsters, emphasizing his incredible luck. Derek remained unconvinced, silencing him abruptly. He demanded proof of identity within 10 seconds, his sword glowing with power as the countdown began. Seeing the deadly intent, Ludian felt the pressure mount rapidly. With only moments to spare, Ludian blurted out the first piece of embarrassing information he could recall about the Knight Captain. Cynthia. He then rapidly recounted the incident at Harpana Waterfall. How Derek was caught flirting with the clerk Cynthia, how the madam had sent her back to her parents' home, and how Derek had desperately clung to Cynthia's waist, begging her not to leave. Derek sputtered, utterly flustered, as the surrounding knights murmured, questioning the truth of the tale. Ludian smirked inwardly. He might face retribution later, but immediate survival was secured. Just then, Colin pushed through, complaining about Ludian's tardiness and how bored he'd been. He urged Ludian, the slowpoke, to hurry up and rejoin the ranks. Ludian sighed. The young master never changed. Derek, still suspicious about Ludian's pristine condition, was quickly shut down by Colin, who nonchalantly stated Derek could handle any problems anyway, and they shouldn't waste energy since they were near their destination. Ludian confirmed his survival, and they prepared to move out. He noticed Derek's hostility hadn't entirely vanished. As they walked deeper into the cavern, Adi commented that no one seemed to notice its presence. Adi explained that ordinary humans in this world couldn't perceive its existence unless it chose to reveal itself, the sole exception being Ludian, its outsider master. Ludian pondered the term outsider. Given it was only just discovered, it likely wasn't some universal perk for all transmigrators. Did that mean, he wondered with a jolt, that there were others like him who had fallen into this world? As this thought crossed his mind, they entered the final chamber. An ominous purple energy pulsed from the center, swirling around a dark, imposing figure seated upon a throne-like structure. A chilling voice echoed, confirming Ludian's unspoken question. There are. The figure held a familiar golden sword, daylight, and an ancient scroll. The figure revealed itself, a terrifying undead knight wreathed in dark energy. Colin, however, focused on the sword, excitedly confirming the Duke's information about the holy sword daylight being here was true. He then identified the Death Knight, Sir Simmer, the infamous knight who betrayed the Duke's family and fled with the sword 50 years ago. Simmer expressed disappointment, noting they weren't the Duke's knights he had expected. Derek wasted no time, ordering his knights to surround the traitor. He confronted Simmer directly, demanding to know why he betrayed his duke and abandoned his chivalry to become this monstrous creature. Simmer merely chuckled darkly at the accusation of betrayal, sneering that he wouldn't waste his breath explaining anything to fools who couldn't even see their own foundations rotting away. Declaring the question worthless, he unleashed his power, summoning ranks of skeletal soldiers from the shadows. Derek commanded his men not to panic. He ordered the second and third squads to hold off the skeletons while he and the first squad dealt with the traitor himself. Simmer let out another low chuckle as Derek, sword blazing, led the charge. The chaotic battle raged within the dungeon chamber, knights clashing against endlessly respawning skeleton soldiers. Ludian observed the fight alongside Adi, noting with unease how Sir Simmerdran seemed completely unaffected, almost invigorated by the prolonged combat. The Death Knight laughed maniacally, effortlessly swatting aside the knight's attacks as if they were mere annoyances. Sir Derek cursed, struggling to keep pace, questioning if the traitor's vitality and mana were truly bottomless. Another knight warned that the skeletons were regenerating, predicting they would be exhausted long before Simmer showed any sign of fatigue. Amidst the grim struggle, Colin offered unhelpful shouts of encouragement, urging the knights to stay strong, a display Ludian met with a deadpan expression. Ludian turned to his AI companion, asking for its assessment. Adi confirmed his suspicions, stating an external force was augmenting Simmer's power. Adi suggested Ludian should be able to perceive it too, urging him to use those eyes. Recalling the status window function, Lu Dian focused his gaze, activating the analytical vision. A blue screen flickered into existence, displaying Simmer Dran's information. Death Knight, Knight of Death, bound undead. His stats were formidable, but the critical detail lay in his special characteristic. Currently linked to the dungeon's core, temporarily granting him immortality and infinite mana. Lu Dian processed the information, understanding now why Simmer seemed unstoppable. His enhanced sight followed the energy flow, leading him to a pulsating red jewel set upon a pedestal behind Simmer, the dungeon's core. Audi identified it as a first-class blood magic stone, commonly used as dungeon cores or mana storage for liches. It explained this dungeon was a workshop created by a 500-year-old mage, its core containing considerable condensed mana. Without special measures, Audi warned, their current forces would likely be annihilated soon. Lu Dian considered the core, asking Audi if it could be destroyed. Audi confirmed the stone itself wasn't exceptionally durable, but questioned Lu Dian's ability to bypass the Death Knight guarding it, whose menacing presence filled the path. The odds looked grim. Audi calculated a sobering 90% chance of death if Lu Dian attempted a direct approach, given his current physical abilities and Simmer's likely awareness. Lu Dian scanned the struggling knights, searching for an opening, however slim. Seeing no other option, he resolved to act. Nearby, a knight desperately advised Sir Derek to retreat, fearing they couldn't protect the young lord if he became a target. Derek acknowledged the danger, but doubted Colin would consent to abandoning the holy sword. Colin promptly confirmed this, defiantly stating he would take the sword with him. Derek looked cornered, searching frantically for a viable strategy. Seizing the moment, Lu Dian shouted to Sir Derek, pointing towards the pedestal behind Simmer, asking if the jewel embedded there didn't look extremely suspicious. Derek's eyes widened in realization. It was a blood magic stone. He cursed himself for overlooking it. Immediately formulating a plan, Derek commanded two knights, Arnold and Chris, to time their attack and destroy the core. The knights protested, deeming it impossible now that the skeleton's numbers and strength had increased significantly. Derek fiercely insisted, declaring it their only chance. With the retreat path blocked and the enemy constantly reinforcing, they were finished if they couldn't eliminate the source. Audi questioned Lu Dian's tactic of revealing the core's location. Lu Dian, while retrieving a hefty war hammer from the deceased adventurer's belongings, explained that focusing Simmer's attention on protecting the core was precisely the point. There was no need for Lu Dian to risk himself directly. Among their group, he now arguably had the highest chance of success by creating a diversion. Even without mana manipulation, he could at least wield this heavy weapon. He hefted the hammer, knowing that getting caught now meant certain failure. Derek signaled the attack. As Arnold and Chris moved, Simmer intercepted Derek, preventing him from supporting them. The Death Knight roared, vowing they wouldn't pass. Lu Dian watched, momentarily frozen. Simmer then unleashed a devastating wave of golden energy from his sword, blasting the knights backward, the force echoing through the cavern. Colin recoiled in terror, recognizing the aura wave technique, a sign of a sword master, and immediately ordered a retreat. His command was futile. Another knight reminded him the path was blocked by skeletons, prompting Colin to wail for his father. Derek pushed himself up, rallying the survivors, reasoning that Simmer likely couldn't use such a powerful technique twice in quick succession. He scanned the battlefield, his gaze falling upon fallen knights, a wave of despair washing over him. He gripped his sword tighter, reaffirming his vow as a knight of the Lion Hearts. He couldn't die like this. Even if he perished, he had to ensure the young master escaped. As he prepared for a final, desperate stand, Simmer suddenly turned his head. Derek paused, confused by the Death Knight's shift in focus. Simmer's attention was now fixed on Lu Dian, who was sweating profusely as he dashed towards the unguarded core, hammer raised. Audi wryly commented that Lu Dian's luck in remaining unnoticed had run out, advising him to go now. Lu Dian retorted that since he was already caught, it hardly mattered anymore. Simmer snarled, enraged by the insolent human daring to approach the core. The Death Knight lunged, faster than Lu Dian could react, Lu Dian crying out in fear, telling the already dead corpse to stay back. But before Simmer could reach him, Derek intervened, parrying the blow. The Knight Captain yelled encouragement, urging Lu Dian to smash the core, even offering to forgive the earlier Cynthia incident if he succeeded. Fueled by adrenaline and Derek's desperate plea, Lu Dian shouted his resolve. He charged the final distance, swinging the heavy hammer with all his might, determined to end the threat with a single, decisive blow. Just as the hammer was about to connect, dark, viscous energy erupted from the blood magic stone. A cold, ancient voice echoed from within the gem, filled with rage, questioning how a mere worm dared to touch its heart. It identified itself as Casley Richmond, the great Lord of Darkness, promising to punish Lu Dian's transgression with death. Lu Dian froze, realizing with horror that this stone wasn't just a simple dungeon core. Casley Richmond, he knew that name. A powerful Lich Lord featured in the middle part of the Chronicles, a nation-destroying entity who could slay even a warm-bold red dragon with a single death word spell. The voice from the stone continued, offering a painless death as it began to utter the incantation for its death word. Lu Dian felt sheer panic. This was bad, like realizing you left the oven, but infinitely worse. The spell, a guaranteed kill, focused its lethal energy directly on him. The Lich Lord Casley Richmond, speaking through the blood magic stone, unleashed its ultimate attack, the death word, a spell guaranteeing certain death. Lu Dian braced for the inevitable, but the killing blow never landed. He blinked, utterly bewildered. The spectral image of Casley within the stone looked equally perplexed, confusion clouding her previously wrathful expression. Nothing happened. The voice from the stone echoed again, sputtering in disbelief, questioning why its absolute spell had failed. It wondered aloud if Lu Dian belonged to the divine race. It dawned on Lu Dian then, amidst the chaos, he hadn't actually died from the supposedly certain kill spell. Casley continued her panicked theorizing, unable to comprehend how a divine-level protection spell could thwart her power. Lu Dian turned to Audi, who gave a smug thumbs up, confirming it had blocked the low-level curse cast upon its master. Lu Dian gaped. Audi, even with limited functions, considered a 9th-class instant death spell low-level. Audi puffed up its non-existent chest, boasting about its usefulness as an AI. Lu Dian couldn't help but be impressed. If Audi could nullify Casley's ultimate attack now, its power upon regaining all functions would be dazzling, truly mind-boggling. Infuriated, Casley screamed at Lu Dian to stay put, threatening to open a dimensional gate and confront him directly. Lu Dian recalled Casley's own words. The blood magic stone was her heart. He knew instinctively that a lich's heart was its only true weakness. A grin spread across his face. He wondered aloud if Mr. Casley understood the concept of power dynamics, especially when someone was holding his very fragile heart hostage. He hefted the war hammer, confirming with Audi that the stone's durability wasn't high. Seeing the imminent threat, Casley abruptly changed tactics, desperately trying to bargain, offering anything Lu Dian desired in exchange for her life. When Lu Dian mused that perhaps he wanted her life, Casley frantically backtracked, offering treasures and centuries of accumulated magical knowledge. Anything but her life. Lu Dian simply tightened his grip on the hammer, stating he didn't need any of it. Casley shrieked, commanding Simmer to kill the bastard immediately. Lu Dian scoffed, confident he could destroy the heart faster than Simmer could react. With a final roar, invoking the Lich's name, Lu Dian swung the hammer, shouting for Casley Richmond to turn into light. The Lich Lord screamed about her ambitions and wishes as the stone shattered, crystal fragments scattering like red dust. One of the nearby knights, wounded but alive, cheered at their success. Simmerdran, the Death Knight, let out a final, agonizing howl as his form dissolved, his connection to the core severed. Sir Derek watched his former comrade crumble, murmuring a quiet farewell to his lord. Ludian felt a strange sensation, dark energy swirling around him before being absorbed. A system message appeared. He had absorbed the essence of a top-grade blood magic stone, greatly increasing his physical abilities and granting him 20 mana. His eyes widened. He actually had mana now? His status window updated, reflecting the changes. Mana 20, agility 12, overall combat power 425. He felt a refreshing power coursing through him, a sensation he'd endured years of mistreatment as a servant hoping to obtain. Still, only 20 mana from a 500-year-old lich's heart? That felt underwhelming, like getting socked for Christmas. Adi explained the low absorption rate was intentional. It had applied a filter to the negative dimensional mana, malicious energy, dispersed from the stone before Ludian absorbed it. The raw absorption rate was only about 3%. Adi clarified that the stone contained demonic energy, not pure mana. Absorbing it all would have granted vastly more power, but at the cost of turning Ludian into a demon, an outcome Adi assumed he wouldn't want. Ludian broke into a cold sweat, realizing Adi had saved him from a terrible fate. After the stone, his head might have been the next thing to break. Sir Derek approached, his gaze sharp. Ludian mentally confirmed Adi was concealed. Derek noted that if it had looked like Ludian was absorbing malicious energy, Derek's sword would have been the next thing to break. Ludian felt a tap on his shoulder. Derek placed a hand there, acknowledging that thanks to Ludian, they had survived. He commended him, stating he'd done well. Ludian quickly made sure Adi was appropriately hidden, perhaps behind some top-secret caution tape. Back at the castle, the Margrave welcomed his son Colin with open arms, bursting with pride. He declared that this father always knew Colin would succeed, boasting that now no vassals would doubt his abilities. Colin was the future of Iskar. Colin preened, smugly agreeing it was only natural given his abilities. The Margrave beamed, stating that with Colin succeeding him, the family's position was secure. Ludian watched the scene, witnessing the rapid darkening of an ancient Count family's future in real time. The spoils from the dungeon were indeed tremendous, filling endless wagons and significantly contributing to the family's wealth. The Margrave informed Colin that envoys from the Duke Delphion's family would arrive in about a week to appraise the Holy Sword. Even if the Duke didn't come personally, the representative would be someone important. He instructed Colin to make a strong impression. Colin, preening, assured his father his name would spread throughout the empire thanks to this success, especially with the Delphi I duchy involved. Ludian sighed internally. Revealing the dungeon master was Castle Richmond would make Colin world famous, but it was better kept secret. Colin was already troublesome enough. Giving him an even bigger reputation would be unmanageable. For now, continuing as Colin's servant seemed the most prudent course. The Margrave turned to Ludian, expressing confidence in sending Colin out into society now. He acknowledged Ludian, praising his actions based on Derek's report. Rickard dismissed Ludian's humble claim of merely doing his duty, stating that striking the core while facing the Death Knight showed remarkable bravery where an ordinary person would freeze. He declared Ludian worthy of continuing to assist Colin, entrusting the boy's future to him. Ludian managed a stammered thanks, internally screaming, wondering when he could possibly escape this gilded cage. Later, Ludian celebrated his success privately, admiring his rewards, a year's bonus, 10 days paid vacation, and a pocket watch from the dungeon. Hooray for Caline! Hooray for Iskar! He cheered sarcastically. Adi, now adorned with a tiny crown and necklace looted from the dungeon, remarked on his good mood. Ludian acknowledged that money was good, though Adi pointed out the smuggled items, like the spell books, were likely more valuable long-term. Not that Ludian could use them immediately. Ludian knew trying to cash in magically potent items would attract unwanted attention from the magic tower. He had handled the disposal of most items carefully, though Adi wished they could have taken everything. Ludian reassured it, stating he had secured the truly valuable items. For a mage, research notes and spellbooks containing their life's work were paramount. Castle Richmond School was once among the top 3 on the continent. These books alone could likely buy several castles. Thinking ahead, they needed war funds, and these resources, even unusable now, would be vital later. The lingering question was how Sir Simmer, the knight who stole daylight, became Castle's Death Knight, a detail absent from the original story. Ludian recalled daylight was originally retrieved by the protagonist Abel's companion, Sword St. Croix, after visiting his family home, but the specifics were never explained. He surmised that since the story was entering the full-scale Heavenly Demon War arc, the author likely deemed Simmer's backstory a minor detail and cut it. Recalling Simmer's parting words about betrayal and rotting foundations, Ludian felt certain it wasn't simple greed. It was probably connected to the demon race. Their primary enemies would be the demons. Audi noted the demons would likely be the biggest obstacle to recovering its terminals. Ludian agreed grimly. They would need to wipe them out. With Castle dead, the demon race would surely make a move. Ludian suspected Castle had been disguised as a court magician in the neighboring Rohan's kingdom. Her sudden demise would undoubtedly trigger a reaction from the demons there. Considering the impending conflict, Ludian realized they needed a demon sword. Audi questioned this, asking if a holy sword wasn't better against demons. Ludian explained that holy swords were difficult to obtain and attracted too much demonic attention, citing the immense difficulty of acquiring daylight, even with his foreknowledge. Besides, he revealed one of the top demon swords happened to be located right here in the Iskar region. Acquiring it would make their future tasks much easier. The demon sword Diablo. Leaving the castle behind, Ludian traveled towards Barren Village, a reasonably sized settlement of about 500 people located in the Iskar border region. His plan for a peaceful vacation, however, was immediately derailed by a desperate plea. Marco, the village chief, was practically bowing, begging Ludian for help. Ludian sighed. This wasn't how he intended to start his break. He'd simply wanted some downtime in his hometown before undertaking the quest to retrieve the demon sword Diablo. Initially, seeing the chief running frantically towards him, Ludian feared a major crisis had struck the village. But Marco, grabbing Ludian with tearful eyes, was just begging for help with paperwork. Tax collectors were due next week, Marco wailed, and the village books were a mess. If the numbers didn't match, a severe reprimand awaited him, making Ludian his only hope. Ludian dryly suggested accepting the reprimand, but Marco explained that fists and fines usually accompanied it. He pleaded for Ludian, whose intelligence got him hired by the Count's family, to save him. Ludian chided Marco for not learning his letters when offered, suggesting hiring a scribe instead, but Marco lamented the cost. With a sharp glare, Ludian relented. He agreed to help just this once, much to Marco's effusive gratitude, who declared Ludian the village's greatest treasure. Ludian, resigned, sat down to work, definitely not resting. Marco, overjoyed, promised a beef dinner and headed to the storehouse. Ludian reflected that he'd arrived in this world with nothing, and Marco's help had been crucial for survival. He focused on the documents, his writing precise. He noticed the work wasn't as tiring as expected, attributing it perhaps to his newfound mana, which knights used to fight for days. Finally, the paperwork was done. Ludian presented the completed tax forms to a worshipful Marco. Ludian felt a touch smug. After 2 years as a servant, he could handle this kind of task blindfolded, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Just as he was relaxing, Marco mentioned he should go see Rebecca tomorrow morning. Ludian jolted upright, panicked, asking why. Marco explained Rebecca had been kindly taking care of Ludian's empty house while he was away, so thanking her was only polite. Ludian sputtered that he never asked her to do that, but Marco added she'd been commuting daily, waiting for his return to manage things. Marco tearfully admonished Ludian, pointing out 3 village men were lovesick because of her, and Ludian should be a man about her managing his house. Ludian clutched his head in despair, the situation spiraling. A shadow fell over the room. Rebecca herself appeared, beaming. Having heard he got vacation time, Marco tried intercepting her, saying Lu Dian was tired, but she brushed past him apologetically. Marco gave Lu Dian an apologetic look. Rebecca pouted, complaining that Lu Dian shouldn't make such a face after so long apart. Lu Dian mentally reviewed her profile, Rebecca von Bloodrain, a beauty whose glamour seemed out of place in the rustic village. She received numerous confessions, and even nobles supposedly had eyes for her. Only Marco's guardianship prevented potential incidents. Rejecting such beauty seemed foolish, but Lu Dian knew getting involved meant death. Leaving the village for Kalane's service was partly because of Rebecca. She was Rebecca Bloodrain, the Bloody Witch, a demon eater absorbing malicious energy, one of the novel's main heroines and a key party member. Specifically, the obsessive Yandere type who'd whisper, "I love you," while stabbing the protagonist. Her ominous surname hinted at her heritage, descended from a demon hunter and a half-demon. Years ago, Lu Dian had helped rescue her from kidnappers targeting her bloodline. Afterward, she showed deep affection, eventually revealing her full name. Recognizing the name from the novel, Lu Dian immediately fled to the Iskar Count's family for employment. He noted her emerald orange eyes, recalling they turned blood red upon full awakening. Rebecca playfully asked if he'd fallen for her. Lu Dian denied it, internally cursing his ambiguous past attitude that led to this situation, having only realized her identity after becoming close. Rebecca cheerfully offered to bring food from her home. Lu Dian knew she was a super powerful ticking time bomb, not yet showing the madness from the original story. Yet, he couldn't coldly push her away. Both the original orphan Lu Dian and himself found it difficult to reject genuine warmth, especially after experiencing the villagers' open disrespect before his employment. Only Marco and Rebecca were truly close to him here. If not for her dangerous awakening event, he admitted he might have pursued her. Meanwhile, on a cliff overlooking the region, the knight Colin asked his captain if they'd gone too deep, unsure of their purpose. The captain curtly reminded him to follow their vague orders, disguise themselves as bandits, infiltrate Iskar territory, and find a Grand Master-level being hiding somewhere. Colin grumbled about the absurd, suicidal order, finding someone as powerful as the Archduke Yahello in a border region, amazed they hadn't been caught by the Lionhearts yet. The captain acknowledged the ridiculousness, but stated the military commander-in-chief personally issued the order 3 days ago. Find a 9th-class mage or a Spirit King contractor specifically in the border territory. The timing was suspicious. The order came less than half a day after intelligence reported the Iskar heir recovering the Holy Sword. The captain wondered if there was a connection. 3 days later, Lu Dian sat outside, noticing an unsettled atmosphere in the village. Rebecca approached, reporting recent bandit sightings in the southeast. Lu Dian was surprised. Barren Village was close to Iskar's main castle, not some remote area where bandits thrive. Normally, patrols would swiftly eliminate them. Rebecca confirmed the sightings weren't verified, but adventurers had been spreading warnings. The village chief was investigating carefully. Lu Dian sipped his soup, finding the timing too coincidental. In his 3 years here, bandits were unheard of in this border region. He concluded, as expected, that his enemies had likely made their move. 2 days later, Lu Dian stood before an ancient-looking archway near the Iskar border. He'd found the location of the demon sword Diablo. Just as the original novel described, it was easy to find, requiring no scattered keys or specific eclipse timings. Adi remarked it was reasonably well hidden, but not impossible to find. Adi then questioned why such a place remained undiscovered for so long. Lu Dian grinned darkly, revealing the simple, grim reason. Everyone who had previously tried to claim the sword died. Before Lu Dian stood the demon sword Diablo, a weapon from the ancient era, active during civilization's dawn and the Second Era's War. Records of it were scarce due to its immense age. This blade sealed the ancient demon king, Diablo himself. Its rank was comparable to the Holy Sword Graham, not remotely inferior. Originally obtained through difficult trials, It now rested unguarded in an empty cave. The reason it remained masterless was simple. The moment anyone touched it, they were cursed and utterly erased, even great dragons. Lu Dian considered the implications. If Diablo were resurrected now, before the main story even began, it would overturn the entire game board. Conversely, if Lu Dian could control its power, he would gain the strength to reshape events. Everything hinged on Adi's protective abilities. Could Adi truly withstand the demon sword's curse and its power? Lu Dian wasn't overly worried, though. Adi confirmed the sword belonged to one of the demon kings from the Great Demon War. While Adi wasn't directly involved in that ancient conflict, it knew the general power level of the gods who participated back then. Adi felt confident it could protect Lu Dian, especially considering the sword was weakened by its seal. Lu Dian paused, wondering just how ancient the sword truly was. The Great Demon War was at least 10,000 years ago, and Adi mentioned its own ruins were 30,000 years old. Perhaps Diablo hailed from an even earlier civilization? Adi announced they had arrived at the sword's location, deep within the jagged cave. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary, undecorated sword resting against a rock. Lu Dian mused that this very simplicity might be why Diablo chose it. Steeling himself, Lu Dian reached out and grasped the hilt. His eyes widened in shock. A powerful force slammed into him, stripping away his clothes in an instant, a rather extreme wardrobe malfunction, and throwing him back. Darkness seemed to shatter around him. Lu Dian realized with horror that not only were his clothes gone, but his body was paralyzed. His mind felt like it was cracking, splintering under an unseen assault. Adi appeared, expressing concern. Lu Dian did not look all right. Lu Dian asked what Adi saw and how long he'd been out. Adi reported it had purged the mental corruption attempting to seize his brain, a process taking about 5 minutes. Mental corruption. Lu Dian understood now. It wasn't a simple curse, but the curse of Demon King transformation. Whoever became the sword's master inherited part of the ancient Demon King's power and mind, gradually transforming into Diablo's incarnation. The problem was the power was too immense for any human body to bear, causing it to crumble. Thanks to Adi, Lu Dian had avoided the transformation curse while still being able to wield the sword. He felt this level of power was sufficient, even if he couldn't fully unleash its cursed potential. Diablo itself easily overpowered regular magical swords. Suddenly, Lu Dian heard a faint sound. A disembodied voice, Diablo's, mused if this was the first human in millennia, lamenting that he would likely die from the curse anyway. Another failure. The voice grumbled about boredom and being trapped, cursing Archangel Uriel X. It wished someone could withstand the curse so it could lend its strength, but deemed it impossible for a mere human to endure what even the Dragon Lord could not. Two dark, ethereal arms manifested from the sword, wrapping around Lu Dian's own. The voice sighed, mentioning X said the promised time was near, deciding to go back to sleep. It offered some half-hearted encouragement for the human to stay strong against the curse. Lu Dian, annoyed, told the noisy presence to stop. Diablo sputtered in disbelief. It checked its non-corporeal senses, realizing Lu Dian was still alive. No human had lasted 30 seconds holding the sword. It wondered if time was distorted, but quickly confirmed less than 10 seconds had passed. It asked if Lu Dian was truly okay. Lu Dian confirmed he was fine, much to Diablo's astonishment. Diablo explained the curse was designed by archangels using intricate rituals, potent enough to kill even gods. Lu Dian briefly wondered if they were demons, not angels, but dismissed the thought. He clarified he hadn't overcome the transformation. The power felt different. Diablo, aided by Adi's subtle prompting, realized Lu Dian hadn't been affected by the curse at all. Impressed, Diablo declared the human worthy to receive the aid of the sealed Demon King. It proposed a contract, not a curse, but a pure blood contract, granting power to wreak havoc without cost. A proposal unprecedented since creation. Lu Dian considered the offer. With such overwhelming status, he could achieve anything. But he knew there was a catch. He pointed out Diablo hadn't mentioned what happens when the era of myth arrives, the time when the seal would break. Diablo was stunned. Ludian knew that. Ludian laid out the truth. The contract Diablo offered would become void once the seal was broken. He recalled from the novel how Diablo served as a power source for the main party, faithfully lending strength to Swordmaster Crocs. But once the seal broke, Diablo mercilessly killed Crocs. Diablo demanded to know what Ludian was. Ludian ignored the question and proposed a bet. Diablo would use all its strength to dominate him. If it succeeded, Ludian would become its slave. But if Diablo failed, it would lend Ludian its strength and wisdom for the next 100 years, regardless of the seal breaking. Diablo burst into laughter, mocking the human's arrogance for daring to challenge it, even having luckily avoided the curse. Such arrogance, it declared, almost made it want to make Ludian the Demon King. It agreed to the 100-year term. Ludian pressed the point. Diablo had waited 10,000 years. What was another 100? It had no reason not to cooperate. Gotcha. Ludian knew Diablo wouldn't accept an open-ended offer, as it would be freed in about 100 years anyway. But adding the time limit guaranteed acceptance. Good, it's determined. Diablo roared, unleashing its power, challenging Ludian to break free from its domination if he could. Ludian considered his options. Using Diablo cautiously until the seal lifted was safer, but fully utilizing its power now could reduce casualties in the upcoming Second Great Demon War. He braced himself against the overwhelming demonic force, collapsing under the pressure, naked on the cold cave floor. He questioned what happened. Had Adi failed? No. If the corruption took over, he wouldn't be thinking. But success shouldn't look like this. He felt a sudden presence. Dark energy coalesced. Diablo's true form, described as large enough to cover mountains, manifested, though smaller than expected. The demonic figure looked down, truly surprised. It wondered aloud if there really was a human receiving the hidden blessing of the gods. Diablo stared, incredulous. A human blessed by a hidden god actually existed? Ludian wondered if the Demon King meant Adi. Adi was artificial intelligence, but its power could easily be mistaken for divinity. Diablo noted, however, that this blessing didn't seem to fully protect Ludian, leaving an imperfect lineage. Ludian processed this. It wasn't success or failure, just an ambiguous outcome. Diablo explained its powers were sealed, and in exchange, Ludian had temporarily lost the god's protection. What would Ludian do now? Ludian, surprisingly buff now, snapped his fingers, accepting the challenge. Bring it on. Since prediction was impossible, taking a gamble seemed the best option, whether it led to death or a meal ticket. Diablo acknowledged Ludian's impressive guts, but seemed hesitant about actually fighting. Then, unexpectedly, Diablo declared it would pass on the fight. The Demon King chuckled, amused that Ludian, despite having no power, had proposed a duel, truly befitting the Demon King of arrogance. Ludian muttered for it to shut up. Diablo sensed an unusual flow of fate around Ludian, finding the situation very entertaining. Ludian curtly asked what Diablo planned to do about this fate or flow. Diablo decided it would willingly cooperate with the kid. It had a gut feeling following Ludian might be fun. Suddenly, a massive, energy-infused eye appeared, startling Ludian. Diablo declared there was no need to dominate Ludian now. Ludian yelped, wondering if Diablo had caught him off guard. Adi apologized, explaining the entity it was handling possessed greater power than expected, delaying its intervention. Adi announced it would release the boundaries laws immediately. The world snapped back into focus, leaving Ludian clothed again and bewildered. Diablo chuckled, reminding Ludian of their 100-year agreement and asking him to take good care of it. Ludian sighed. Good was good, he supposed. At least he'd secured a foundation against future disasters. Back in the village, sounds of sobbing could be heard. Ludian was vigorously training when Rebecca approached, looking exasperated. She questioned his renewed training, recalling he'd claimed to be done with swordsmanship. Ludian grinned, explaining he'd found hope again. With Adi, Mana, and Diablo, he could carve a new path, not just live as an extra. In a world where wars even involved alien species, stats were as crucial as equipment. His mana stat of 20 was average night level, but realizing and wielding mana were different skills. He absolutely couldn't let anyone, especially Sir Derek, find out he suddenly had mana. He pondered finding a better training method than practicing alone. Rebecca interrupted, wanting to discuss countermeasures for the bandits with the village chief. As Lu Jian started talking about bandits or demons, Rebecca seemed distracted, poking his abs. Adi chimed in, stating nothing unusual had happened yet, but preparing minimal defenses while waiting for state help was wise. Lu Jian agreed, adding that if push came to shove, he could handle the bandits himself. He paused, a sudden thought striking him. Could this be Rebecca's awakening event? His past interference might have twisted the original story. Even acting out of sympathy could have fatal butterfly effects. Rebecca asked what was wrong, smiling brightly. Lu Dian reassured her it was nothing, pushing down the image of her potential Yandere future. Rain began to fall that night. Elsewhere, two hooded figures traveled on horseback. The younger one, Luciella, urged her companion to slow down. She excitedly told her uncle that the holy sword daylight, missing for 50 years, had been found. Her uncle seemed less enthused, stating they weren't weak enough to stake their fate on one relic, though he admitted curiosity. Luciella argued daylight was still one of the Empire's most renowned divine artifacts. Her uncle grumbled they should have gathered a proper team, but retrieving it would take time. Luciella insisted his presence alone was enough etiquette for the Iskar family. The uncle sighed, blaming her for dragging him on this duo trip as they rode on, approaching the Iskar territory. In Barren Village, Marco frantically directed villagers, ordering them to rebuild palisades and sharpen blades. He yelled at them for incompetence, asking if they planned to die together, telling them to ask the veteran Ludian if they didn't know what to do. Ludian, hooded against the rain, listened nearby as Marco praised his experience serving the young lord. Some villagers muttered resentfully about taking orders from a filthy orphan who'd climbed high. Adi asked if Ludian was all right. Ludian claimed not to care, though his expression tightened. Adi noted the negative emotion looked good on him. Ludian bristled. Being mocked wasn't pleasant. Diablo offered to turn the villagers into low-grade monsters with a bit of demonic energy. Ludian curtly told it to stop. Diablo sighed dramatically, lamenting the missed spectacle. Ludian retorted that Diablo just seemed desperate to use its power out of boredom. Just then, Marco ran up, announcing the person Ludian was looking for had arrived. Hooded figures emerged from the rain. The guild members from the Information Guild Ludian had requested greeting Rudian of Iskar. Inside a cabin, Ludian received the report. Conchin Hill had been attacked. Ludian realized this meant the attackers weren't local bandits. Conchin Hill was a military stronghold. Their true identity had to be exactly. The informant confirmed they were likely disguised soldiers from the Rohan's kingdom, currently hiding nearby and stirring up trouble. 3 territories had already been hit. A large subjugation force would handle it soon, but Ludian knew the bandits weren't the real problem. The crucial issue was whether demons or their minions were mixed in with the soldiers. That would make the fight much tougher. Adi suddenly warned, "Master, they're coming." Already? Ludian sighed. No choice then. Stepping back into the rain, he called to Diablo, asking for help. Diablo chuckled, agreeing. Why not? It would be good entertainment to gauge this era's descendants. But it warned Ludian that his body was still too frail to handle its full strength. Ludian stated he knew that. Diablo mused that if Ludian became a demon like it suggested, things would be simpler. Ludian repeated he knew that too. Becoming a demon meant being hunted by protagonists or secret societies. Rebecca called out, sounding anxious. Ludian saw her worry, wondering if her demon-eater blood was reacting to the crisis. He reassured her, telling her to wait there for an hour. he'd finish quickly in return. In the pouring rain, Marco confronted the heavily armed soldiers, declaring this the Margrave's jurisdiction and confirming through the Information Guild that they weren't random marauders. Their leader, Bernard Calcio, smirked, acknowledging the Empire's guild was competent. He admitted they stirred things up too openly and were found out fast. Soon, Iskar's army would pursue them. Since they'd suffered following orders, Bernard sneered, they'd take compensation from the village first. Ludian focused his attention on Bernard. His status window revealed Bernard Calcio, Rohan's Special Cavalry Cooper Unit's 3rd Squad leader, age 32, with a respectable combat power of 1,280. These were definitely the ones attacking villages. Ludian knew staying to fight was suicide. He yelled for the village chief and everyone else to retreat. Some villagers hesitated, demanding to know where the attackers thought they were going. Bernard spurred his horse forward, annoyed the villagers weren't already fleeing, charging directly at Marco with intent to kill. But Ludian intercepted the blow, blocking the mana-infused sword strike, much to Bernard's surprise. Bernard realized the boy had infused his own sword with mana, parrying the cavalry charge. Bernard commented on the nice sword, feeling lucky to score some loot. Ludian retorted, asking who said it was his, before leaping back. Bernard scoffed, questioning the boy's audacity to run from cavalry. Arrows suddenly flew from the village palisade, forcing the soldiers back. Bernard cursed the filthy rats. The villagers had prepared with intent. Ludian cheekily pointed out Bernard was only realizing that now. Judging by the lack of life deeper in, the villagers must have evacuated beforehand. Bernard ordered his men to kill them all, noting there weren't many archers and they could pick them off carefully. He dismissed the militia as mere civilians who couldn't beat his unit. Suddenly, one of his men cried out, struck down by a villager with surprising skill. Ludian deftly blocked another attack. The soldiers realized this kid knew how to handle a sword, warning each other not to underestimate him just because he blocked the captain's strike. Marco yelled for more arrows, ordering the militia to lure the soldiers deeper. Arrows found their marks, piercing armor. A soldier asked Bernard what to do. Bernard hesitated, noting the preparations and suggesting waiting for the follow-up unit, but then furiously ordered his men to chase them down immediately. Inside a fortified house, Marco worriedly asked if Ludian would be okay. Ludian explained they needed to reduce numbers, using the terrain advantage to even the odds despite the skill gap. Marco pressed, asking how long Ludian could hold out. Ludian simply reassured him he absolutely wouldn't die. The Oldham would have struggled, but now, he declared he'd be back, feeling he'd finally gained a foothold in this world. Elsewhere, Rebecca paced anxiously. She knew she had to go help, but feared she would only get in Ludian's way. She knelt amidst flickering candles, fighting an internal battle, trying desperately to hold back her awakening urges, saw her eyes flicker red, a predatory hunger surfacing. She groaned, wanting to eat. Outside, the battle raged. Ludian clashed with soldiers, acknowledging Diablo's power could end this easily, but it remained an uncontrollable force. Using it recklessly could unleash its power wildly, potentially destroying the entire village. A soldier gasped as Ludian parried, shocked he could wield mana before being cut down. The remaining soldiers encountered sharp wooden traps hidden in the mud. One of the militia leaders grinned. Obviously, beast traps worked best on beasts. Bernard cursed, furious they'd turned their turf into a hellhole. He recalled executing villagers easily before, wondering why these fought so desperately. Marco proudly proclaimed the grit of Barren Village, reminding the weaklings they couldn't just swallow the village. Ludian added Baron had the highest ratio of retired soldiers. Even average villagers knew basic spear techniques. Marco himself was a former centurion, dishonorably discharged but tough enough to take on special unit members. Ludian warned Bernard killing them wouldn't end it. Bernard eyed Ludian, noting his youth yet ability to block a mana-infused attack. Calling Ludian the heart of the village, he found it hard to believe he'd awakened mana at his age. In respect for their struggle, Bernard offered one fact. This village was their planned final stop before hitting the Iskar estate. It was their practical limit. Bernard clarified he was only a squad leader, not the captain, implying he wasn't the only force attacking. Ludian's heart sank. More squads? He doubted they could hold out. Reinforcements were surely coming, but could the militia last? He considered using Diablo's power. No, not yet. He decided to deal with the ones present first. Suddenly, a voice boomed, asking what Bernard was doing. Bernard paled, recognizing the captain. A new, imposing figure rode into view. Ludian felt a chill. His status window revealed Huma, age 145, Rohan Special Cavalry Cooper Unit Commander, total combat power 3,620. And his trait, mid-tier minion of Demon King Iblis, half-human, half-demon. A demon's lackey. This just went from bad to oh crap. The imposing figure of Huma, commander of the Rohan's Cooper unit, materialized before Ludian. Damn, Ludian thought. The only silver lining was that the commander appeared alone. He quickly checked Huma's stats. Combat power 3,620, boosted significantly by his status as a mid-level demon minion, putting him on par with Sir Derek. Huma's basic abilities completely overwhelmed Ludian's current stats. Could he even handle a mid-level minion like this? As an avid reader, Ludian knew the theoretical power levels of named demons, but facing one in reality was a whole different dimension. Bernard Calcho, the squad leader, stammered an apology to his captain for his incompetence leading to the loss of men. Huma simply called him an incompetent fool before delivering a vicious backhand strike, sending Bernard reeling, blood spraying from the impact. Ludian watched, momentarily stunned by the casual brutality. He yelled for the village chief to run. Marco, understanding immediately, shouted for everyone to scatter. Marco glanced back, worried for Ludian, but knowing from experience that Huma was far beyond their ability to handle. He urged Ludian to survive as the villagers fled. Ludian now stood alone against the demonic commander, wondering what the powerful being planned. Huma questioned why Ludian was interfering, asking sarcastically if his side hadn't received prior notice. He mused aloud whether the orders had moved too quickly or hadn't come down properly. But regardless, this was happening in his territory now. Ludian scoffed, telling Huma not to underestimate his senses or pretend to be righteous. Huma introduced himself as Huma, minion of the great demon Lord Iblis, and stated he noticed Ludian serve the same great beings. He demanded Ludian's name and the identity of his master. Ludian cursed internally. Huma was mistaking him for a fellow minion. The trace demonic energy Ludian received from his contract with Diablo must be confusing the commander. Huma chuckled, remarking that Ludian had pretty good intuition for a human. Seeing an opportunity to buy time for the fleeing villagers, Ludian simply introduced himself as Rudian. Huma pressed, noting the lack of a family name or noble status, asking which Lord Rudian served. Ludian knew demons infiltrating human society were often particular about status when creating minions. To dispel the suspicion, he needed a plausible answer. He claimed service under Lord Asmodeus. Huma's eyes widened slightly in recognition. He acknowledged the name of the goddess of lust and indulgence, accepting Rudian as a comrade, since only fellow servants would know that name. Deep within the sword, Diablo silently raged. Asmodeus, a goddess? The Demon King fumed about the state of the demon realm's hierarchy. Huma commented that Ludian looked weak for someone receiving a goddess's favor, though appearance could be deceiving. Ludian smirked inwardly. He specifically chose Asmodeus because her only criterion for choosing minions wasn't status, but simply being young and pretty. He smoothly stated he'd never received direct communication from that lord, and reminded Huma he was the one invading Ludian's territory. Huma found this lack of communication troublesome, speculating that perhaps proper information hadn't been conveyed because Ludian hadn't established roots yet. Unlike their Erebus group, Ludian feigned confusion, asking where news might have been sent that he missed. Huma pondered, then stated he was sure the letter was properly sent to Marquis Belstead. Ludian's mind raced. Marquis Belstead. He definitely knew that name. So, the Marquis was a demon's puppet. He recalled Count Gus von Belstead, now a Marquis, confirming he was the contact. Belstead was such a minor extra in the original story that Ludian had completely forgotten about him. Now it made sense. Castle Richmond's death had caused this commotion, prompting the demons to send forces as strong as Huma, even to a small village. Huma noted Ludian's sudden killing intent. Ludian brushed it off, retorting that building fighting spirit against an enemy was perfectly normal. Huma remained wary, questioning if Ludian truly intended to face him with such inferior power, whether blessed or human-trained. Ludian readily agreed he had no blessed power, and his capabilities were worlds apart from Huma's. However, that was only comparing their pure abilities. Ludian began to draw upon Diablo's power, dark energy swirling around him. Huma looked startled. Adi issued a mental warning. Ludian could only withstand this power for about a minute before exceeding critical limits. Ludian knew. Well then, Ludian breathed, launching himself forward. Diablo, observing from the sword, decided to see how useful Iblis's minion really was. Ludian moved with blinding speed, his blade clashing against Huma's defenses. He pressed the attack, dodging and weaving, mana flaring around his borrowed blade. With a final, powerful strike, he severed Huma's arm at the elbow. The armored gauntlet fell away. Huma stared in disbelief, demanding why his arm wasn't regenerating. Ludian explained that Diablo's blade possessed more than just cutting power. It felt like his soul was being cut away. The reason Diablo was classified as top tier, he elaborated, was its god-slaying capability, a keyword vital in the story's later stages. Diablo's power didn't just affect the physical body, but directly impacted the soul and divine nature, inflicting absolute weakness on immortal beings. That was its true value. Ludian admitted he'd originally planned to risk his life in close combat, but fortunately, Huma had let his guard down. Huma roared, refusing to accept defeat. He lunged, but found his own power draining away, seemingly sucked into the demonic energy swirling around Ludian. Huma realized this power was definitely not something the goddess of lust could bestow. Ludian smirked, telling Huma not to compare him to such small fry and to be quiet. The time limit was almost up. Huma, berserker granted power by Lord Iblis, couldn't believe he was losing to a youngster. Ludian didn't hesitate, unleashing a final barrage of slashes that tore through the commander. He spun, driving the blade home, ending Huma's life. He noted how battles using demonic energy usually contaminated the surroundings, but Diablo offered another advantage. It cleanly absorbed other demons' energy, preventing contamination and discovery. Someday, Ludian vowed, he would cut the throats of all the demons throughout Rowan's. Huma's dissolving head cursed him as a traitor. Ludian coolly asked if Huma was still confused, then told him to die. With a final surge of dark energy, Huma dissipated completely. Ludian let out a breath as the last vestiges of purple energy faded. Watching Diablo absorb Alec Huma whole was unsettling. It truly was a potent magic sword. He felt a sliver of relief that no demonic trace lingered, avoiding potential complications. Diablo's voice echoed in his mind, less concerned with cleanup and more with Ludian's earlier actions. The sword questioned why he sent the human girl, Rebecca, away separately, asking with blunt curiosity if she belonged to him. Ludian sputtered, dismissing the notion as nonsense. He explained that with Castle gone, demons might now target Rebecca. Diablo acknowledged the logic, noting that as a descendant of that predator line, demon interest was expected. The sword mused that Rebecca could become something formidable if awakened, even suggesting Ludian awaken her and keep her by his side. Ludian firmly told Diablo to shut up. He vividly recalled the suffering the original protagonist, Abel, endured because of Rebecca's volatile nature. Had Diablo witnessed that, it wouldn't make such a careless suggestion. He stated resolutely that Rebecca's awakening was ultimately Abel's burden in the original story. If possible, he preferred she live a normal life, and he had no intention of staying connected with her moving forward. Diablo sounded unconvinced, merely remarking they'd see how things turned out. Ludien acknowledged they might cross paths again if the original story's plotlines involving Rebecca as Abel's companion unfolded, but he hoped to avoid it for now. Just then, Adi alerted him. Someone was approaching. Ludien tensed, instantly wondering if more of Huma's marauders had appeared. Adi quickly clarified they didn't seem hostile, just an ordinary old man and a girl. An old man and a girl? Ludien found that an odd pairing for travelers in this area. He considered hiding but decided against it. His stamina was drained, and avoiding non-enemies seemed pointless. The two figures emerged from the trees. Ludien stared. Adi's definition of ordinary clearly needed calibration. The luxurious fabric and cut of their cloaks were unmistakable signs of nobility. If he'd known, he would have already bolted. The blue-haired girl smiled brightly and called out a cheerful hello. As they drew closer, Ludien caught the faint, sharp scent of blood clinging to them. He offered a cautious greeting in return. The man with purple hair appraised him, remarking Ludien was like a wary little dog, but his instincts passed muster for a warrior. Simultaneously, Adi reported an inability to discern the man's information due to a significant capability gap. The man smirked, confirming Ludien had decent instincts. A capability gap that large? Ludien felt a prickle of alarm. These two were incredibly strong. The man glanced around at the aftermath of the battle, asking if Ludien was responsible for all the carnage. Ludien quickly clarified he wasn't alone, having fought alongside the village militia. The man, however, pointed with his chin towards Alec Huma's dissolving corpse, stating that particular kill looked like Ludien's distinct work. Caught, Ludien had to admit it was him. The man then asked which noble family's young master Ludien was, noting his youth. The girl commented on her uncle's unusual interest. The man explained it was rare to find someone with such skill in a backwater place without a proper academy. He added that awakening mana at Ludien's age naturally drew attention. Ludien was startled the man could perceive his mana just by looking. The girl mentioned mana as well, adding that even she wasn't yet a graduating student from the prestigious Maha Empire Academy. The man concluded Ludien wasn't an academy student then, pondering who this surprisingly capable young man, who didn't seem like a local noble, could be. He directly asked for Ludien's name. Arudian, sir, Ludien replied, then faltered when asked for his family name. He admitted he didn't have one. Both travelers reacted with surprise, realizing he wasn't even a knight. Ludien quickly salvaged the situation by explaining he was merely a squire to Lord Colin von Iskar, mentally adding that his mana was obtained through the most cheated method possible. He puffed his chest slightly, stating this was his hometown, and he'd fought to protect it, plus he wanted to test the new power he'd finally acquired. Having answered their questions, he turned it around, asking who they might be, as he didn't recognize them from the area. The man chuckled, introducing himself as Marquis Keitel von Delphi I, and the girl beside him as Luciella von Delphi I. Ludien froze. Keitel von Delphi I, the sword saint of the Empire. He knew the name well, the undisputed top active sword master, younger brother to the current Duke Delphi I, and former commander of the Royal Guard. Ludien also recalled from a novel that Keitel was the predecessor to Sword Saint Croix, a future companion of the protagonist. Seeing him still active was unexpected. Luciella's name rang a bell too, a steadfast supporter of the protagonist and a commander on the anti-demon front, though originally married off early, disqualifying her as a main heroine candidate. She looked much younger now, Ludien observed, fresh-faced but possessing the same confident aura described in the novel. Their presence confirmed Ludien's suspicion. They must be here to appraise the holy sword daylight. Keitel then asked bluntly who taught Ludien swordsmanship. Internally panicking, Ludien blurted out that he learned the basics from a passing mercenary and picked up more by joining the knight's drills whenever possible. Kydell narrowed his eyes, asking if this mercenary was perhaps someone hiding their identity, like the legendary mercenary king, or if they had any notable traits. Audie mentally projected a hilarious image of itself wearing tiny armor, captioned a passing mercenary. Lujian resisted the urge to facepalm, wondering how on earth he could explain learning swordsmanship from a floating red AI eyeball. He thought about the ancient Adora civilization swordsmanship stored in Audie's data, techniques he hadn't fully mastered yet, potentially making him the sole inheritor in this era. Before Keitel could press further, Luciella gently intervened, telling her uncle not to push so hard and apologizing to Ludian for his unusual excitement. Ludian blinked, surprised by a noble apologizing, a stark contrast, Colin, and mumbled that it was fine. Luciella then brightly suggested they help clean up the village since it was in a mess, easily persuading her reluctant uncle. Ludian could see why readers in the original work were fond of her direct, helpful nature. Truly a heroine candidate. He mentally gave her a thumbs up, but his brief respite was over. Orders arrived, summoning him back to the Iskar main estate for a celebratory feast. Sir Derek was tasked with guarding the Marquis and the young lady. Ludian groaned internally. He was supposed to be on vacation. Why did a mere squire need to get involved in appraising the holy sword? As the Delphi ones departed with Derek, Luciella waved, thanking Ludian again for his hard work. Later, settled into a guest room at the estate, Ludian lay back, wondering if Rebecca was okay. She had seemed tense earlier. Apparently, she'd refused nursing duties but was dragged here anyway. Ludian had come along half-willingly, figuring it beat being roped into village repair work. A sudden realization struck him. The faint smell of blood he detected on Keitel and Luciella earlier. It must have been from those Rohin's special forces. Just the two of them had effortlessly wiped out over 500 elite soldiers on their way here. The display of power solidified Ludian's resolve. He needed to get stronger, not just for himself, but because recovering Audie's terminals would involve insane risks. Plus, to wield Diablo properly, he needed to reach at least master-level proficiency. Simply rolling as a mercenary wouldn't cut it. Joining the Knight Order's training to boost his skills seemed the most logical path forward. From outside, sounds of laughter and chatter drifted in. The feast celebrating the daylight recovery was in full swing. Ludian listened, thinking it wasn't bad. He knew, based on the novel, that this place would descend into hell in about 5 years. He hoped they could at least live carefree until then. Audie suddenly announced a guest. The door opened, and Colin strode in, demanding to know why Ludian wasn't at the feast. Ludian awkwardly tried to explain that as a commoner squire, he wasn't exactly party material. Colin scoffed, declaring that Ludian was a squire and therefore should be assisting his master at the feast, completely ignoring Ludian's vacation status. Colin conceded Ludian had been short-sighted not to attend. Before Ludian could reply, Sir Derek entered, directly complimenting Ludian on making quite a big contribution this time. Ludian was taken aback. News had reached the Count, Margrave Rickard already. Normally, word of his deeds wouldn't spread until after a formal investigation. That meant either Marquis Kydell or Luciella must have reported his actions directly to the Count. Derek confirmed the Count was very pleased with Ludian's performance. Ludian noted Derek's unusual talkativeness. Derek continued, explaining that while things with the Delphi One ducal family worked out well regarding daylight, they had made one additional request. Ludian found it interesting, but questioned why Derek felt the need to inform him. Colin dramatically revealed the request. Colin was to enroll in the Imperial Academy and train there for 7 years. Ludian instantly understood. Even though Colin earned merit recovering daylight, the Delphi ones likely wanted the troublemaker safely shipped off to the academy. 7 years of diligent study to bury his past dishonor? Ludian smirked inwardly. The ducal family was dreaming an impossible dream, trying to reform Colin. And, Sir Derek added, fixing his gaze on Ludian, for that academy trip, Rudian, you're included too. Ludian stared, pointing a finger at his own chest in utter disbelief. Me. Inside the Iskar estate, Marquis Kydel von Delphi I held the recovered Holy Sword Daylight, confirming its authenticity. He felt the unique sensation it emanated, just as he remembered from his childhood. Margrave Rickert and his assembled vassals murmured in approval. The Sword Saint's validation was definitive. Keitel mused on the strength of Simmerduran, a High Knight 50 years ago who must have reached master level as a Death Knight. He admitted underestimating the Lion Hearts, acknowledging they provided the information, but their actual success was impressive. Turning to Sir Derek, Keitel praised the knight's reputation as the Iron Lion of the East, stating it was no exaggeration, and proposed a friendly spar sometime. Sir Derek, visibly honored, readily accepted the challenge. With the appraisal complete, Keitel presented the official certificate confirming the Iskar family's acquisition of the Holy Sword, concluding the main business. However, Keitel then announced he had a small request for the Count. Margrave Rickert tensed. Bringing this up before all his vassals meant it was anything but small, likely something Keitel was determined to achieve. Keitel began, mentioning he'd heard of a boy named Rudian among the young Lord Colin's servants. Rickert cautiously confirmed Rudian's existence. Keitel then made his request bluntly. He wanted Rickert to give him the boy. Rickert asked for the reason behind this unexpected request. Keitel stated honestly that he was attracted to Rudian's talent. He noted Rudian was a commoner, yet to even take the knight's oath, and expressed his desire to place the boy in a foundation directly operated by the Duke's family. Rickert internally scoffed, wondering what supposed talent Rudian possessed, especially since reports indicated he lacked mana aptitude. One of the listening nobles, a rather plump young man, looked like he was more interested in the feast buffet than the political maneuvering. Rickert hesitated, acknowledging Colin might be disappointed, but refusing the powerful Marquis outright was difficult. Luciella, beside her uncle, beamed with anticipation. Rickert stated he had already marked Rudian as someone to assist Colin in the future. He then proposed a compromise: send Rudian to the Imperial Academy, with both the Iskar and Delphi I families looking after him until graduation. After that, once Rudian became a proper knight, he could decide his own affiliation. Rickert considered this a shrewd move. It placated the Marquis while allowing Iskar to potentially retain Rudian if he proved valuable later. Seizing the moment, Rickert also announced that since the topic of the academy was raised, it was a good opportunity to resolve Colin's enrollment too. Colin looked utterly appalled beside him. Later, Sir Derek formally informed Ludian of the decision. He would officially become a transfer student at the academy, enrolling alongside the young master. Ludian stared, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. That was all well and good, but did anyone bother asking for his opinion? As Keitel and Luciella prepared to leave, they met Ludian again. Luciella thanked him for his hard work and said she would see him later. Ludian wryly wondered if getting him sent to the academy had been her plan from the start. Keitel granted Ludian a week to get his affairs in order before joining them on the trip to the capital. Luciella enthusiastically declared accepting her uncle's proposal was a good choice. Ludian mumbled his understanding. He plastered on a smile, expressing happiness at having a good junior, his replacement, while internally celebrating his escape from Colin's service and pitying the poor soul who would take his place. With a wave, Ludian departed, promising to see them in a week. He returned to Barren Village, finding the locals celebrating his apparent good fortune in the tavern. Village Chief Marco toasted him enthusiastically, marveling that their small village was producing a knight. Ludian tried to temper the excitement, reminding Marco he was only an aspiring knight, not yet official. Marco dismissed the distinction. Attending the capital's academy practically guaranteed it. Marco, drawing on his own military experience, insisted knighthood was certain. The only real question was which noble Ludian would choose to serve. Changing the subject, Ludian inquired about Rebecca. Marco's expression sobered slightly. She was still confined to bed, seemingly deeply affected by the trauma of the recent attack. Lu Jian murmured, and I see, focusing on his food. Later, Lu Jian visited Rebecca. She assured him she felt a bit better and had heard about his impending departure for the capital. She then asked him, with uncharacteristic directness, if he truly had to go, tentatively suggesting he could stay, work in the village, and they could live quietly and happily together. She quickly pulled back, blushing, admitting it was a selfish thought. Lu Jian fell silent, reflecting. Avoiding Rebecca, because of her potential instability, was just an excuse. He knew her importance in the coming age of chaos predicted by the novel. He confessed internally that he had turned away from her feelings previously out of pessimism regarding his own inadequacy, feeling unable to match her latent potential. But now, with Adi and Diablo, things felt different. He gently took her hand, admitting that he, too, would like that peaceful life, if possible. Rebecca looked surprised. Lu Jian explained that while others saw going to the capital as advancement, he didn't particularly care for it. However, he continued, there was something he absolutely had to do. If he simply stayed and did nothing, Barren Village, as he knew it, would be destroyed within 10 years. The original story detailed how Rebecca, losing her home in the Rohin's invasion, eventually met the protagonist Abel and began her journey. Even if Abel eventually defeated the demons, the village and people Lu Jian cared for would be gone. That future wasn't acceptable, not for him, and not for Rebecca. Only he, possessing knowledge of the future, could prevent it. It would be challenging, but he had to take this path to the academy to gain the necessary strength. He knew Rebecca wouldn't fully grasp his words. She looked down at their joined hands, then asked quietly, Rudian, what if I awaken this blood? Her eyes flickered with red light. Would it be helpful to you? Lu Jian stared, shocked into silence. Rebecca whispered that somehow he knew about her hidden nature. He frantically tried to process this deviation from the original timeline. She wasn't supposed to awaken until meeting Abel. He strongly urged her not to awaken that power, warning it would only bring unhappiness. He explained her demon eater ability, which absorbed demonic energy but twisted the user's mind in the process. He earnestly told her that regardless of fate, he wanted her to live happily in the village, to remain the bright, energetic person she was. A fleeting thought crossed his mind. Could he substitute for Abel? But he pushed it aside, deciding for now just to stay put. Rebecca smiled, seemingly accepting his words. Good thinking, she said, but added that, in exchange, he had to make her one promise. Lu Jian asked what it was. She leaned closer, a determined glint in her eyes. When everything is over, don't go anywhere else. Come back to me. After a moment's hesitation, under the moonlight filtering through the window, Lu Jian agreed. Of course. Back in his room, sitting with Diablo resting nearby, the sword's voice echoed. It was you, wasn't it? Lu Jian asked what it meant. Diablo specified Rebecca's condition, accusing Lu Jian. Lu Jian scoffed, calling it severe conjecture. He countered, stating the demon eater power only manifested after exposure to demonic energy, specifically high-level energy. He reminded Diablo that using its power on others without his consent violated their contract. Diablo sounded amused, remarking that Lu Jian's knowledge confirmed its decision to follow him was correct. When Lu Jian pressed if it was admitting guilt, Diablo denied it, reasoning that if it had directly caused the awakening, it would have suffered repercussions due to the contract, yet it felt fine. It acknowledged its great power might be an indirect factor, but nothing more. Lu Jian paused, a dreadful possibility dawning. He instinctively clutched his chest where a faint energy pulsed. Diablo confirmed his realization. Damn, Lu Jian cursed aloud. It was because of him. The minuscule trace of demonic energy near his heart, the proof of his contract, was potent enough to inadvertently trigger Rebecca's dormant power. Lu Jian sighed, telling Diablo he'd appreciate a heads-up next time. The sword casually agreed to keep it in mind, adding that it doubted prior knowledge would have changed anything. Lu Jian looked out the window into the night, a sense of unease settling over him, hoping nothing would go wrong. 1 week later, Lu Jian stood ready with his travel pack, alongside Colin, and his retinue. They stood at the gates, gazing out at the sprawling metropolis before them. Nevin, the magnificent capital of the Mauryan Empire. Ludian gazed upon the bustling streets of Nevin, the Mauryan Empire capital. The sheer scale, populated by diverse races like beastmen and elves, finally made him feel like he was truly in a fantasy world. It dwarfed Iskar's main castle many times over. Colin sidled up, asking if Ludian had grabbed something good to eat, before complaining about why his father and even Derek seemed to care so much about a mere squire. Ludian inwardly scoffed. Colin likely couldn't fathom that his attendant had awakened mana. Colin then revealed their father had instructed him to bring Ludian into the Iskar family immediately upon academy graduation, finding the whole situation strange. Ludian now understood the reason behind the odd joint sponsorship agreement, though he suspected the Count hadn't intended for Colin to blurt this out. Colin, however, declared his belief in the friendship built between them, claiming they weren't the type to hide secrets, even though his father told him to keep quiet. Ludian forced agreement, thinking privately that while he didn't know about friendship, he definitely felt resentment from cleaning up Colin's messes. Colin suggested they meet again upon entering the academy, offering Ludian his protection for being looked down on as a commoner if he stayed by Colin's side. Ludian thought Colin still didn't get it. It was far more likely Colin would be expelled for causing trouble first. Well, Ludian mused as he looked towards the imposing academy building. That wasn't his problem anymore. They arrived at the magnificent main residence of the Delphi I Duke. A man with light blue hair greeted Marquis Keitel, chiding him for picking up something strange again when he was only asked to retrieve the holy sword. Keitel retorted that collecting talent was a hobby he'd developed in his old age, asking if the man was being too harsh. The man, Duke Vincent Delphi I, head of the house, addressed Keitel as brother, expressing surprise that Iskar had actually succeeded. Ludian recognized Vincent, Keitel's older brother and the highest core figure in the Mauryan Empire. As Keitel presented the holy sword, Duke Vincent murmured that it really happened as the previous generation's prophecy foretold. Ludian caught the word prophecy as the Duke invited them inside. The Duke turned to Ludian, remarking it had been a while since he'd seen Keitel covet someone like this, and invited Ludian for a private chat as well. Ludian felt bewildered by the sudden personal attention. Inside a luxurious sitting room, Duke Vincent thanked Ludian for his hard work on the long journey. Keitel added that such effort was natural for retrieving a holy sword. Ludian knew this wasn't just a simple thank you meeting. Being brought into the house meant they had a specific purpose. Duke Vincent asked Keitel if he wasn't upset about how much he'd given to the Iskar family. Keitel sipped his tea, replying it was something he had to endure. Vincent pressed, finding it curious why Keitel, usually uninterested in Foundation matters or the children brought there, was acting differently today. Why specifically bring this boy all the way here? Vincent wondered aloud. Turning to Ludian, the Duke asked permission to call him Rudian, which Ludian granted. Vincent confirmed Ludian was one who directly participated in the dungeon conquest with the Iskar heir. He continued, stating he'd heard Ludian was the primary contributor who destroyed the dungeon's core and eliminated Simerdran, who prolonged his life via the dungeon link. Ludian confirmed this, inwardly wondering how a duke in the capital knew such intricate details. Vincent then leaned forward, asking if Simerdran had said anything significant when confronted. Anything at all would be fine, the Duke insisted, urging Ludian to tell him anything he heard from Simmer. Keitel looked slightly confused, thinking Simmer was just a thief. Ludian decided there was no need to hide it, recalling Simmer's final words. He recounted Simmer's lament about people, not even knowing that the ground beneath their feet is rotting. If he had to add one more thing, Ludian offered, just before being annihilated, Simmer uttered, "My lord." Duke Vincent's eyes widened sharply. Keitel asked what was wrong. Vincent revealed Daylight's other name, the Sword of Prophecy. He spoke of the previous generation trying to settle past wrongdoings, but now the inevitable was happening. He quickly dismissed Keitel's concern, thanking Ludian again for indulging his request. Lu Jian remained silent, processing the exchange. Later, at the Maha Imperial Academy, Marquis Keitel presented Lu Jian to the headmaster. The headmaster, Marquis Roses Bivalent, greeted Keitel, noting it had been since the Crown Prince's birthday celebration last year. Lu Jian instantly recognized the headmaster, a war hero famed for fighting northern barbarians 30 years ago and guardian of the Northern Front. Keitel introduced Lu Jian as the one discovered in Iskar territory, calling him a useful child, an unexpected benefit beyond just retrieving the sword. The headmaster asked if Keitel meant Lu Jian was not just talented, but a genius. Keitel replied, perhaps, suggesting he might even be at Sword St. Crox's level. Lu Jian internally balked at the comparison. Crox was known as the martial god, the only one besides the protagonist capable of facing gods with a sword. Being compared to Crox felt less like talent, and more like a calamity waiting to happen. Keitel stated there was no need for specific verification. They could judge in a few years. He requested the headmaster look after Lu Jian, given his commoner origins. The headmaster agreed, adding gruffly that if any students gave Lu Jian trouble, he'd educate them like the northern barbarians. Lu Jian was shown to his room in the Maha Imperial Academy dormitory. He gaped. It was crazy. A private room, easily as nice as Colin's opulent quarters back at the Iskar estate. Keitel asked if he liked it, confirming this would be his residence for the next 7 years. Lu Jian agreed it was great, but asked why Keitel was doing all this for him. He mentioned checking the Delphi 1 Foundation contract and finding no coercion or obligations beyond the joint sponsorship with Iskar. Keitel asked rhetorically if wanting to pave the future for a promising talent wasn't reason enough. Lu Jian countered that it wasn't. It was too much money for simple charity, and the contract lacked even minimal protection for such an investment. Keitel chuckled, acknowledging Lu Jian's sharp mind, recalling he'd worked as Colin's secretary. He revealed the truth. He made a bet with Margrave Rickert. After Lu Jian graduated, they bet on whether he would choose to join Iskar's Lionheart's Knights or Delphion's Glory Knights. Lu Jian mentally filed this under nobles doing weird noble things. Keitel explained this was why there were no obligations in the contract. Lu Jian thought internally that he didn't intend to choose either side. The academy was just a stepping stone. Keitel simply stated he looked forward to seeing Lu Jian's choice and departed. Lu Jian smirked to himself. His real choice was to run away with the benefits once he got strong enough. Alone in his room, Lu Jian called out to Diablo, asking if the sword had sensed any demonic energy in the Delphi 1 mansion. Adi materialized, confirming Diablo hadn't sensed anything. Diablo's voice erupted indignantly, questioning the youngster's doubt, boasting that even sealed, its senses were sharp. Adi asked if something was bothering Lu Jian. He admitted there was a little. He recalled the original novel's plotline. Duke Vincent, along with Keitel, were assassinated by demons. After their deaths, Luciella took over House Delphi 1. The circumstances surrounding the Duke's family became a mere MacGuffin. Lu Jian pondered the reasons. Keitel's assassination while traveling outside the capital, like his recent trip, made some sense. But the Duke being assassinated openly within the capital felt strange. Simply being an enemy of demons seemed an unnatural reason. By that logic, most high nobles in the capital would be targets. There had to be something more, something important related to the Delphi 1 family that couldn't be dismissed. Perhaps, Lu Jian concluded, he should get a bit friendlier with the Duke's family while he was here. Lu Jian found himself in a large lecture hall, surrounded by curious stares from other students. Adi smugly noted that plenty recognized its master's true worth. But Lu Jian found the sheer level of attention overwhelming, even knowing transferring would be tough. Diablo, ever the gourmand, surveyed the room, likening the abundance of souls to a human buffet. Lu Jian mentally told the sword to shut up for a second. He pondered the reason for the intense scrutiny. Was it solely because he was backed by the prestigious Keitel Foundation? That seemed unlikely, given there were over 30 sponsored students just in the night department. Including himself, there were 7 first years present. Just then, a friendly-looking upperclassman approached, asking if he could sit nearby. Ludian agreed, introducing himself. The student introduced himself as Adele, a third year, glad to meet the infamous transfer student. He explained they were both sponsored by the same foundation, making him Ludian Sr. Ludian returned the greeting, but questioned the infamous label. Adele seemed surprised Ludian didn't know, explaining it had been nearly 10 years since the foundation last brought in a transfer student. Ludian internally scoffed. 10 years seemed a long time, but was it really worth this much fuss over a random commoner, not some prince or princess? Adele, seeing Ludian's confusion, elaborated that transfers were essentially banned at Mock Academy. The only exceptions were those with exceptional renown or high-ranking nobles closely connected to the imperial family. Ludian's case bypassed this partly because Sword Saint Keitel personally sponsored him, and also because it had been years since the Foundation's last transfer student, none other than Crooks himself. Ludian was surprised to learn Sword Saint Croix had come from the Delphi 1 Foundation. Adele added that Colin, the hero who retrieved the Holy Sword, was also receiving significant attention for similar reasons. Ludian briefly recalled Colin was in a different department in class, not that he planned on seeking out his former master anyway. Adele then revealed the main reason he sought Ludian out, a special request from the student council president. Adele clarified he meant Princess Luciella, figuring Ludian must have heard her name since he'd met Lord Keitel. Ludian was stunned. Luciella was the student council president? Adele explained it was tradition for Foundation seniors to guide newcomers, and he'd been assigned as Ludian's guide. However, since they were both in the night department, Adele felt a formal introduction was insufficient. He suggested starting with a conversation of the body, a supposed tradition for aspiring knights. Ludian looked intensely wary at the suggestion, despite Adele's reassurance that everyone was nice. They arrived at the Mock Imperial Academy training arena. Two fifth-year students greeted them, Oliver Duran and Claudia Reyes. Claudia commented that Ludian was just a cute kid, not the monster she'd been expecting. Adele then introduced another figure, Karen Letitia, a final-year student. Karen greeted Ludian enthusiastically, confirming the rumor that the Sword Saint himself brought him in. Ludian tried to deflect the praise, but Karen insisted Keitel wouldn't commend someone without good reason and declared they should assess his skills now. Before Ludian could protest further, she challenged him to a match. Karen offered a wooden sword, assuring the freshman she wouldn't go all out, merely wanting to gauge his abilities. Her expression then shifted to one of intense battle lust as she declared, "Let's go full power then." Ludian noted the blatant contradiction. Adele nervously asked Karen about going overboard, but she playfully brushed it off, saying she just wanted a taste, not to devour him, a distinction Ludian found meaningless. Claudia admitted her curiosity, mentioning Lord Keitel had only ever personally chosen Sir Croix before this. Ludian felt cornered, briefly wondering if he should just unleash hell and take over. Karen noted his unusual fighting stance and asked for the name of his sword style. Ludian replied, Adora style, describing it as a sword-based martial art. Karen, having never heard of it, challenged him to attack. Ludian accepted readily. He lunged forward, engaging Karen in a rapid exchange with their wooden practice swords. Karen parried his blow, the force evident, but Ludian smoothly evaded her counter and continued his fluid movements, pressing the attack with surprising footwork and positioning. Observing, Oliver commented Ludian seemed to lack lower body control, his movements too light. Claudia agreed, calling his form messy and disappointing. Ludian ignored them, landing a blow that sent Karen stumbling. Adi seethed internally at their critique of a god-slaying sword style, but Ludian mentally hushed the AI. It was just sparring. Adele encouraged him not to hold back, but Ludian muttered he was giving it his all. He faced Karen again. Karen looked thoughtful, conceding she wouldn't have understood his style without facing it herself. From the outside, it looked like wild swinging, but she now saw every move was organically linked, creating a chain of counters that blocked retaliation. It was a style designed purely for killing. Impressive, yet his lack of mastery was obvious. She doubted this raw form was enough to truly capture Lord Keitel's interest, unless there was something more. Declaring it disappointing, she decided to end the match. Karen leaped high, bringing her wooden sword down in a powerful, mana-infused overhead strike. Lu Jian met the blow directly. A wave of force erupted, stunning Oliver and Claudia. Karen stared in disbelief. Another student nearby recognized the blue aura of a mana-enhanced strike, realizing Lu Jian must also wield mana to have blocked it. Purple energy now flowed from Lu Jian through his own wooden sword as he smirked, calling it pretty much cheating. Karen cried out as the impact numbed her arm. Lu Jian rubbed his own stinging arm, annoyed, thinking she'd channeled mana into it just to humiliate him. Karen stammered, shocked that a newly admitted commoner could use mana. She composed herself, conceding she now understood how he became a transfer student, and admitting she hadn't expected him to block her final, mana-charged blow. She bowed slightly, apologizing for testing him that way, and acknowledging it was wrong to use mana as his senior. Lu Jian grimaced, hoping this wasn't a recurring theme. Luciella probably meant well setting this up, but her judgment seemed questionable, like asking a toddler for stock tips. Karen, still embarrassed, offered to grant Lu Jian one request as an apology. Her companions looked on, stunned that Karen was apologizing and that Lu Jian had blocked her attack. Just then, a new voice cut in, asking about the commotion and addressing Karen. Adele nervously greeted the newcomer, Kepler Senpai. The student, Elvin Kepler, easily deduced Karen had gotten cocky testing the new student and received a blow for her trouble. Elvin casually placed a hand on Lu Jian's shoulder, offering an apology on Karen's behalf. Lu Jian froze, recognizing the name, Elvin Kepler. His mind raced back to the original novel. The Kepler family were major antagonists, appearing during the Superhuman War arc. Elvin Kepler himself, Lu Jian recalled with a jolt of dread, was the one who assisted the final boss. Elvin Kepler observed Lu Jian, remarking on his aggressive personality to Karen before suggesting he'd arrange another meeting soon. Karen bristled, insisting she didn't need Elvin's help stepping in. Elvin smoothly countered, asking if factions or positions should really matter at a simple gathering meant to welcome new students. He added pointedly that he was there at Lady Luciella's request, reminding Karen they weren't really in a position to disregard the student council president's authority. Karen fell silent, unable to argue the point. Elvin then declared that as a senior student, he would take responsibility for the day's sparring incident. Lu Jian watched the exchange. He hadn't planned on associating further with Karen or her group, but Elvin intervening, a Kepler, changed the calculation entirely. With a sudden, bright smile that seemed slightly out of place, Lu Jian cheerfully agreed to Elvin's proposal. Later, back in his room, Audie commented that its master seemed to have gotten too relaxed lately. Lu Jian admitted he was relaxed, luxuriating in the simple joy of being away from Colin. Who knew freedom could feel this good? But Audie gently reminded him of his objective, learning about Elvin Kepler and his group. Lu Jian sighed, his brief moment of peace evaporating. Right? Elvin Kepler. He hadn't expected to encounter that name here. Not yet. He recalled the Superhuman War arc from the novel, the only chapter depicting conflict born from differing positions rather than simple good versus evil. Elvin had been a villain, yes, but not a straightforward enemy. 3 days passed without any contact from Elvin. Lu Jian mulled over the original story, trying to infer Elvin's current actions based on past events. If his guess was right, he had a rough idea of Elvin's motives. Deciding waiting was pointless, Lu Jian resolved to approach him first. He checked with Diablo, confirming the Demon Lord would lend its power if a clash with demons occurred. Diablo sounded delighted at the prospect. The sword then launched into a typical tirade, indignant that demons dared plan another invasion of the Middle Realm after 10,000 years without its involvement, calling it preposterous. Lu Jian's sweat dropped, wondering if all top-tier demon lords were blessed with egos the size of continents. Audie noted Lu Jian seemed quite concerned about the Keplers. Lu Jian confirmed his interest, stating that, if possible, he'd like to make them allies. The elven Kepler, he remembered, wasn't just a knight. He was a psychic. Ludian knew that by this point, the secret organization of psychics should be actively expanding their influence behind the scenes in the capital. Psychic powers, lacking established theories, were often ridiculed by traditional magicians. This disdain led to tragedy. The psychics remained neutral during the devastating Second Heavenly Demon War, planning to gain fame by dealing with demons only after the magician's forces were weakened. However, the protagonist Abel and his companions ended the war before the psychics could act. Their failed plan resulted in the disastrous superhuman war. Ludian believed that if the psychics had participated in the demon war, the subsequent conflict and its enormous sacrifices might have been avoided entirely. He decided then he would find a way to make those psychics participate in the coming war against the demons. Diablo cackled, quite liking Ludian's method of drawing others in to use as shields. Audie expressed doubt about Ludian's ability to sway them given his current status, but Ludian dismissed the concern. Status and ability were irrelevant, he asserted, if you held the right cards. And, thanks to his knowledge of the future, he held countless pieces of information that could serve as leverage. With renewed purpose, Ludian donned his cloak, ready for a trip into the imperial capital. Meanwhile, Elvin and his younger sister arrived in Nevin's western bustling district. Elvin looked around uncertainly, questioning if they'd taken a wrong turn, as the area seemed frequently patrolled by guards. Maria Kepler, a third-year liberal arts student, confidently assured him their information network was thorough, especially reliable regarding demons due to its connection with the temple. Elvin still expressed concern. The street was surrounded by nobles, and mass casualties would be impossible to handle. Maria told him not to worry, revealing she had brought a secret weapon from their family, an intricate, hourglass-like artifact emitting a green glow. Elvin stared, shocked she'd brought an out-of-place level artifact. Maria explained she brought it precisely because the situation demanded discretion and they didn't know what might emerge. Elvin sighed, refocusing on their mission and reminding the others of their important roles. They needed to find traces of demons. Two younger students, Del and Nell Luda, second years from the night department, confirmed they would handle it. Maria praised the Luda family's renowned ability to detect energy signatures, wistfully lamenting that Elvin had inherited such talents from her. Elvin brushed off her complaint, reminding her it was for their purpose, and soon enough, she would be leading everyone. Ludian navigated the dimly lit streets of Nevin's unauthorized entertainment district, a place teeming with underworld activity. Audie inquired about his plans. Ludian replied he had nothing specific in mind for now, merely observing. He knew that at this stage, secret organizations were building power, leading to fierce territorial disputes, including clashes with demon forces preparing for the Second War. He asked Diablo if it could detect any significant demonic energy clashes within the capital, even outside the underworld. Diablo scoffed, boasting that a city like this couldn't escape its senses. That was fortunate. Ludian's current goal was to naturally insert himself into the ongoing territorial fights between the psychics and demons. Directly confronting demon lords was foolish, but they likely operated through subordinates in a place like this, minimizing the immediate risk. Alec Huma's words echoed in his mind. The letters sent to Marquis Belstead. Getting involved with Belstead would be perfect. Gus von Belstead, the demon's puppet, the culprit behind the future assassination of the Keitel brothers. He was the number one person Ludian needed to eliminate eventually. But first things first, Ludian needed to find Elvin Kepler's current whereabouts. As if on cue, a rough-looking man accosted him, demanding to know why he was lurking around and telling the outsider to leave nicely. Ludian smirked inwardly, a guide appearing right on cue. He responded provocatively, asking what business it was of the thugs. The man bristled, angered by the disrespect. Before the thug could react further, Ludian channeled crackling blue energy into his hand, unleashing it in a swift strike that sent the man collapsing with a cry of pain. The terrified thug stammered, asking if Ludian was a knight. Lu Jian leaned down, informing the man he'd let him go if he answered some questions truthfully. He demanded information about any nobles acting suspiciously in the underworld recently, paying special attention to any with green hair or wearing Maha Academy uniforms. Lu Jian pressed intensely, demanding every detail the man had seen or heard, without missing anything. Elsewhere, Maria mentioned hearing that Karen had taken charge of the hot topic news student, apparently at Luciella's request. Elvin mused that Luciella quite liked Karen, which wasn't ideal for their faction, but Luciella wasn't an enemy. They needed to either recruit her or ensure her neutrality. Maria wondered about the possibility of the new student shaking things up. Elvin considered it. The fact Karen tested him and was embarrassed suggested the boy had high potential for future development. But overthrowing their plans? Elvin dismissed the thought. Lu Jian was just a first-year youngster. The outcome wouldn't be reversed. Elvin confidently declared that he was the one who would become the Sword Saint's disciple. Maria wisely pointed out that Karen Letitia, who had been competing for that position for 7 years, was the one they truly needed to be wary of. Elvin conceded the point, and they departed into the night. Lu Jian finished his interrogation, a predatory grin spreading across his face. Found them. He confirmed with Adi that it could sense the Kepler's energy signatures nearby. Elvin's voice drifted from nearby, remarking on the Luda twins locating a mutant psychic, calling such an irregular's existence unexpected. Maria Kepler emerged into view, the strongest psychic in history and the final boss of the superhuman war, an existence outside the norm. Perched high on a rooftop, Lu Jian double-checked with Diablo about his concealment. The sword, usually boastful, advised caution this time. Lu Jian agreed. If the Kepler siblings were moving directly, it wasn't for a simple reason. Adi buzzed beside him. Well then, Lu Jian thought with anticipation, it was time for the highlight course of their capital tour. Picking up from his observation post, Lu Jian watched as the Kepler siblings and their companions reached their destination. They stood before the Grand Heart Theater. Elvin confirmed with grim satisfaction that their target, Marquis Belstead, was indeed involved, scoffing at the arrogance of magicians who acted superior while oblivious to the danger at their feet. Maria assessed their chances, mentioning that family documents suggested dealing with Belstead, whether demon or minion, shouldn't be a major issue. Still, she cautioned that multiple opponents or Belstead using his full power would make things difficult. They could only hope he was a simple minion, as the direct descent of a demon lord was unlikely. The group, cloaked and inconspicuous, entered the theater amongst the crowd. Reaching the top floor, they found traces of dark energy, confirming their predictions. The Luda twins immediately sensed demonic energy and the faint smell of blood, wondering aloud how such obvious signs hadn't been noticed before. Elvin explained that the Marquis wasn't merely a merchant, but a former successor candidate from the Magic Tower, likely using magic to conceal his activities. Maria understood. This place was essentially a fortified magician's workshop. Their target, Marquis Gus Belstead, emerged smoking a cigar, casually asking what brought renowned Imperial Academy students to his establishment. Elvin dropped all pretense, accusing Belstead directly of being behind the recent interference with their operations. Belstead feigned confusion about us, then sneered, identifying them as the thieves who had been raiding his businesses. Elvin retorted sharply that someone employing actual thieves had no right to speak. Belstead recognized the Kepler and Luda family crests, warning the mere merchant families without territory that they should prepare for consequences for touching his Theorists United Association. Enraged, Elvin spat that Belstead was a demon's minion. The Marquis's facade finally cracked. He realized they knew everything. Elvin, drawing his sword radiating blue energy, declared he would kill Belstead and eliminate all demon remnants hiding in the Empire. Belstead, surrounded by dark energy, understood their goal was to interfere with his grand plan. Elvin noted Belstead's aura felt stronger than expected, warning his companions not to lower their guard. Belstead calmly remarked on the presence of 5 opponents. Elvin glanced back, correcting him. There were only 4 of them. At that precise moment, Ludian made his entrance, casually deciding it seemed like the right time to jump in. He addressed Elvin, stating he wasn't just here to interfere because the senior had abandoned him for 3 days straight. Ludian quickly reviewed his mental notes on Marquis Gus Belstead. In the original Chronicles of the Seven-Colored World, Belstead was a crucial figure who faithfully served the demons, dividing the Empire before the Second Heavenly Demon War. He achieved notoriety by assassinating both Keitel and Duke Vincent Delphi I. Ludian checked his status window. Gus von Belstead, human, age 53, head of Theurus United Association, high-level minion of Demon Lord Asmodeus, servant of nightmares, possessing temporary immortality through the minion contract, with an overall combat power of 4,070. Oddly, despite being a high-level minion, his stats seemed lower than Aliclimax. Elvin turned, demanding to know who Ludian was and how he'd followed them, insisting they had no time for him and demanding to know if he was an ally or enemy. Ludian declared himself an ally, stating that for now, one of his objectives aligned with theirs, the objective of taking down a demon's minion. Elvin stared, stunned that this newcomer also knew Belstead's secret identity. Ludian smoothly introduced himself as belonging to Adora, a secret organization dedicated to protecting world peace. Adi mentally sighed, wondering where its master had pulled that name from. Elvin admitted he'd never heard of such an organization. Ludian explained it wasn't as large an organization as the Psychic Empire the seniors belonged to. Both Keplers were visibly shocked that he knew about their secret organization as well. Ludian then proposed a deal. He pointed out their blatant approach in this bustling area, expressing doubt that even they could kill Belstead right now. Demons, especially Demon Lord-class minions, couldn't be eliminated by simple physical force, regardless of psychic power. Sending Maria meant they were serious, but Ludian assessed she was still in an incomplete state. He offered his help in dealing with Belstead, asking in return that they form an alliance with his organization. He directed the final question pointedly at Maria. Maria was internally reeling. How had this boy followed them undetected? How did he know she was the leader, not her brother? Ludian pressed, asking what she would do. Maria flatly refused, calling him suspicious and declaring that since he'd clearly been following them, they had no intention of letting him go either. Ludian gave a small shrug, accepting that it had come to this after all. He knew this situation mirrored events from the original work. Belstead survived until the story began, and neither side truly wanted mass casualties in the theater. Belstead interrupted their standoff, asking if the amusing farce was over. He arrogantly challenged the youngsters to rampage all they wanted, curious to see what they relied on to crawl into the tiger's den, and unleashed his power, declaring it was time for the festival. Maria reacted instantly, activating her hourglass artifact. A wave of green energy enveloped them, transporting everyone from the opulent theater floor to a desolate, rocky canyon under an alien sky. Belstead gaped at the artifact that interfered with space, an out-of-place relic coveted even by the great magic towers. He quickly recovered, scoffing that a change of terrain wouldn't grant the inexperienced youngsters an advantage, and began gathering swirling dark demonic energy. Elvin grimaced. With demonic energy now unleashed, there was no need for discretion. Belstead thrust his hand forward, summoning grotesque demonic beasts from shadowy portals. Elvin identified him as a summoner. Belstead laughed maniacally, boasting he had been reborn with power received from the demons, his form beginning to shift. Ludian watched closely as Belstead's appearance changed, and his power amplified significantly. Ludian remembered the setting rule. High-level minions could temporarily transform into demons. He had completely forgotten, explaining the initial low stats. Adi displayed the updated status. Gus von Belstead, race, half-demon, combat power, 12,040, surpassing even Simerdran. The transformed, horned Belstead sneered, promising to make them pay for stirring the beehive. Maria cautioned Elvin not to let his guard down, In this state, Belstead was likely stronger than most demon nobles. Belstead roared, commanding his summoned beasts to attack. Elvin countered, focusing psychic energy. A wave of invisible force erupted, shredding the charging demonic beasts instantly. Belstead stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend the power unleashed by Maria, whose mana he sensed was only at an ordinary level. Maria simply asked if he still hadn't realized it. Ludian watched the unfolding power display, recalling Maria Kepler's true nature, a superhuman who served as a final boss, one of the most overpowered characters in the original novel. Adi's scan confirmed this, unable to determine her full information. Bathed in a radiant golden aura, Maria Kepler, the Golden Empress of Psychics, pointed towards the transformed demon and declared that this place would be his grave. The transformed Marquis Belstead stared, aghast at the power radiating from Maria Kepler, stammering that such strength couldn't belong to a mere human. Floating serenely amidst golden light, Maria declared his struggles pointless. The outcome was already decided, no matter what action he took. As she raised a hand, the golden energy intensified, underscoring her assertion that the result wouldn't change. Pure panic seized Belstead, and he desperately shrieked for his minions, ordering the grotesque beasts to tear the psychic apart immediately. However, the summoned creatures hesitated, visibly confused or perhaps sensing the overwhelming danger before them. Belstead blinked, wondering if he was hallucinating. The barren, rocky terrain around Maria seemed to shimmer and transform, taking on the appearance of a lush, vibrant forest, further unsettling the demon minion. Seeing the sheer power gap, Belstead's bravado evaporated faster than a snowball in hell. He abruptly changed tactics, desperately pleading for a deal. Maria paused, slightly surprised by his sudden offer. Belstead frantically offered his entire network of underground interests and even promised to negotiate a non-aggression treaty with his master, asking if that wasn't what she wanted. He went as far as offering his shares in the association, but his pleas were met only with Maria's cold, amused laughter. She found his pathetic bargaining entertaining, her eyes taking on a faint red glow. Belstead begged her to wait. Ignoring his pleas, Maria unleashed her telekinetic might. A massive serpent beast imploded under the invisible force, followed swiftly by another creature crushed beneath a telekinetically hurled boulder. Ludian watched the effortless display, impressed. Adi mentally whistled, acknowledging Maria was indeed the queen of psychics. This spectacle only reinforced Ludian's conviction. He had to secure her as an ally. With the summoned beasts obliterated, Maria floated gracefully down towards the ravaged ground. Elvin quickly asked if she had finished Belstead off, but Ludian cut him off sharply, advising the senior not to make such assumptions, which puzzled Elvin. Ludian indicated the impact crater, suggesting they verify Belstead's demise first. Elvin scoffed, thinking it obvious the Marquis was dead. Just then, thick, viscous tendrils of darkness erupted from the crater floor, stunning Elvin. Maria, however, remained impassive. A pulsing core glowed within the rapidly regenerating mass, coalescing into a monstrous figure of slick, shifting blackness. Belstead, reformed, let out a chilling laugh. He taunted them, admitting Maria's power surpassed his, but sneering that her strength alone could never overcome his immortality. Maria conceded that, for the moment, they couldn't kill him, regretting not preparing more thoroughly. Belstead gloated, but Maria's expression firmed. She stated that just because his body couldn't be killed didn't mean there was no method. Psychic force slammed into Belstead's new form again, eliciting a pained shriek. Maria reasoned coolly that if it wasn't a human body, it didn't require humane treatment. She declared her intent to crush his body repeatedly until his mind shattered, then drag him back to her family estate for final disposal. Ludian watched Belstead's ensuing agony, thinking death was likely a mercy and realizing he could face a similar end if his own attempts at persuasion failed. Despite the torment, Belstead managed a weak, gurgling laugh. He correctly predicted that the artifact generating the pocket dimension was nearing its time limit. Maria showed a flicker of concern. Belstead pressed his advantage, mocking that manipulating space was the domain of gods, and tools like her artifact had limitations, 10 minutes at most. The hourglass artifact confirmed his words, sand running low, visibly troubling Maria. Belstead laughed again, adding that since he'd been harmed, his master would soon intervene. Maria grew visibly worried. Handling Belstead's contractor would be incredibly difficult, and the potential aftermath messy. Seeing his opening, Ludian casually asked if it was perhaps time for him to step in, surprising Maria. He stood confidently, announcing that now they could establish a proper dialogue. Approaching Maria, he reminded her of his earlier prediction that she wouldn't be able to kill Belstead alone. Maria remained steadfast, refusing his alliance proposal again and insisting she still had methods. Lu Jian smoothly shifted gears, withdrawing the alliance proposal for now, asking instead if she would simply hear the conditions for such an alliance. He cheekily added that, since he was a bit scared, a key condition was her guaranteeing his safety. He then shrewdly suggested that her remaining methods were probably not very elegant, asking if he was right with a pointed smirk. After a tense moment, Maria curtly agreed. She permitted him to state his terms, acknowledging she had little choice, prompting Lu Dian to mentally note her quick decisiveness. However, she issued a stern warning: be prepared if he failed. Lu Dian turned to Diablo, who grumbled, already sensing Lu Dian's plan. The sword asked if Lu Dian doubted its ability. Lu Dian quickly assured it he did not, merely needing confirmation before proceeding. He walked towards Belstead's grotesque form and placed a hand upon it. Channeling Diablo's power, dark energy flowed into the Marquis, who mockingly asked what Lu Dian thought he was doing, insisting mere pain wouldn't work. Belstead's taunts turned to screams of pure agony as Diablo's power coursed through him. Lu Dian noted Belstead's magical pain resistance and regenerative immortality, then taunted him, asking where his confidence went now that his regeneration had suddenly stopped working. Maria watched, stunned. Lu Dian explained that while minion immortality was typically absolute, it could be nullified by a higher-ranking demon's power. He revealed Diablo's true status as one of the 7 thrones, a pinnacle demon lord. With immortality and regeneration blocked, Belstead was vulnerable. Belstead shrieked in terror. Lu Dian grinned fiercely and unleashed Diablo's soul-devouring power. The Marquis was consumed by a vortex of darkness, his screams abruptly silenced. As Gus Belstead dissolved into nothingness, Lu Dian reflected on the man's past. Belstead had lost a family succession competition, turning instead to magic, aiming for the prestigious position of Magic Tower Master. However, his growth eventually hit a wall, pushing him out of the running. In his despair and impatience, a demon approached him, and Belstead succumbed to the temptation. Becoming a demon lord's puppet, he annihilated his own family, seized control of the Theorists United Association, and turned it into a major funding source for demon forces, connecting them with the Empire's upper class. The pocket dimension shimmered as the artifact's power faded. Lu Dian mused that joining hands with demons was unacceptable, no matter how blocked Belstead's path had been. With Gus gone, the demon's influence within the Empire would surely diminish. He noticed a notification, +5 mana. The increase was meager compared to absorbing Castley, likely due to Diablo consuming most of the power. Maria approached Lu Dian, demanding to know how he had managed to deal with Gus. Her eyes widened in shock as she noticed the weapon Lu Dian now held openly. She recognized it immediately as a demon sword. Lu Dian nonchalantly confirmed her observation, asking if there was a problem. Maria questioned his sanity, asking if he was seriously wielding such a weapon and whether he looked like someone who had lost his mind to demonic energy. He seemed perfectly fine, which baffled her. Lu Dian countered rhetorically, asking if it made sense for a demon sword host to fight a minion of the same demon, and questioned if she'd ever seen such a thing. Diablo chimed in mentally, spoiling the moment by remarking that it had seen countless such humans back in the day. Lujian mentally told the sword to zip it. Lujian addressed Maria's unspoken concern, acknowledging her worry, but urging her to focus on the current situation. Diablo continued its commentary about how modern common sense differed from the past, earning another mental rebuke from Ludian. Maria fell silent for a moment, then apologized for her overly sensitive reaction, conceding that the important thing was that Ludian had kept his promise to deal with Belstead. She then gestured for him to proceed, ready to hear the proposal he had mentioned. Later, Ludian found himself seated across from Maria in her well-appointed dormitory room at the academy. Maria formally introduced herself as Maria Lu Kepler, the next leader of the Psychic Empire. Ludian cheerfully responded, introducing himself as Rudian, an official member of Adora, the secret organization for world peace, much to Audie's silent exasperation. Maria took a sip of tea, admitting Ludian's performance was impressive but stating she remained uncertain about his sincerity regarding world peace. She still harbored doubts, noting that Adora was absent from her intelligence department's list of known secret organizations. Ludian smoothly claimed it was because they were an elite few, mentally adding, especially if you count a one-person organization. Getting straight to the point, Maria asked what benefits her organization could gain by forming an alliance with him. Ludian considered the countless potential benefits, but knew he only needed to present the minimum required to persuade her, a condition she couldn't refuse. He explained that Adora approached the Psychic Empire specifically because it met their three conditions for alliance. First, the organization must not be evil. Second, it must possess a certain level of established power. And third, there must be a match in pursuing common interests. Maria accepted the first 2 points, but questioned the third, asking how he could claim common interests without knowing their ultimate goal. Ludian leaned forward, stating their ultimate goal involved psychic powers, specifically gaining public acceptance for them as a mainstream ability, like magic. Maria was visibly stunned, demanding how he knew their deepest secret. Ludian pressed on, stating their current strategy of keeping demons in check beneath the Empire's surface was merely a way to block magician intervention and claim all the credit later. Gaining favor with the Imperial family by eradicating demon forces, he reasoned, aligned perfectly with Adora's goal of pursuing world peace. He further warned that demon infiltration across the continent was beyond imagination. While the Empire was relatively better off, neighboring kingdoms already had leadership compromised by demons. He urged her to use her intelligence department to verify his claims. Maria looked disturbed, questioning if demons had truly penetrated the human world so deeply. Ludian reminded her that Gus Belstead, head of an association controlling 20% of the Empire's logistics, was merely a minion. Did she still not grasp the severity of the situation? Returning to the benefits, Ludian presented his offer. First, Adora would unconditionally provide all information they possessed about demon forces within the Empire. Second, they would connect the Kepler family and the Psychic Empire with the highest-ranking nobles of the Empire to bolster their standing. Maria's eyes widened at this. Lastly, and most importantly, Ludian offered ancient knowledge containing the established theory of psychic powers. Maria shot up from her seat, utterly shocked, repeating his words about the theory of psychic powers. Audie questioned if this offer was truly enough, but Ludian was confident. For a psychic like Maria, this offer was irresistible. While Ludian had known the theory from the start, via Audie's database, it was different for them. He recalled from the original novel that Maria possessed immense power, but had obvious weaknesses. Psychic powers lacked proper theory, making them difficult to learn and less versatile than magic. Psychics were also limited to their specific awakened type. For generations, they had tried and failed to theorize their powers, relying solely on bloodline and innate talent. The theorization of psychic powers, a way to break the wall of talent, was their greatest, long-cherished wish. He was offering a simple path to an ultimate goal they had failed to achieve for centuries. They wouldn't be able to refuse. He revealed that Adora possessed theory books established by a now-perished ancient empire of psychics. He looked at Maria, whose hand trembled slightly, and asked simply what she would do. Within the hidden headquarters of the psychic empire, Elvin asked Maria if she was okay. She confirmed she was fine, walking past swirling displays of information. She cursed Rydian for complicating things, but admitted his offer was something they couldn't refuse. Elvin reviewed their intelligence reports, frustrated that Rydian appeared to be an ordinary commoner. He found it absolutely impossible, declaring he'd never heard of a human handling such a powerful demon sword while maintaining sanity. Only an ego sword sealing a high-ranking demon could destroy immortality, and wielding such a weapon should instantly consume a normal human soul. Maria mused over the enigma of Adora. They knew almost everything about the psychics, yet the psychics knew nothing about them. Elvin decided they could deal with Rydian later if necessary. For now, they could learn about him slowly while keeping him in sight. Maria agreed. As long as Rydian hadn't approached as an enemy, their own benefit was paramount. The key was verifying if his offer was genuine. Information, connections, knowledge, things they desperately wanted, yet the price seemed almost too good to be true. Was his goal really world peace? Maria stated she had an appointment with him tomorrow and told Elvin they should go in. As they walked, Elvin pondered which high-ranking nobles Ludian could connect them with. Perhaps knight families like Iskar, given Rydian's background? There were about 5 Marka-level or above families not closely tied to magicians. Maria acknowledged border counts like Iskar were comparable to great nobles. Elvin speculated it might indeed be Iskar. Maria simply stated they would find out tomorrow.